Writing an intro to a review podcast of the original Ghostbusters is a minefield of bad puns referencing the theme song, or it's full of grandiose statements about how special it is. So let's keep it simple. The movie's a classic, let's discuss. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
There is no David, only Zool.
How much practice did you put into that voice?
Not at all. I do that voice on the regular. Anytime a telemarketer calls, it's always a fun time.
Very good, very good. Yes, welcome everyone. It's a movie podcast. This is the Collector's Cut, and today is the start of a new season. As you might have guessed, I say guess, you see the title of the episode, but we're here today to talk about Ghostbusters, and we'll be working through the franchise, building up to the new entry, Frozen Empire, when it hits in March, which is later this month, of course.
Yeah. I'm sure this won't be any sort of problem where somehow in between recording this and when Frozen Empire's supposed to show up, Sony's just not going to change it again, just to mess with all of our schedules.
Yeah, this was supposed to be a week off, but then they pushed the Ghostbusters movie out a week forward, so we had to get these started coming out a week earlier. So Here we are. We're going to get into it. It's Ghostbusters. We'll start spoiler-free if you so happen to not know what Ghostbusters is and just want some general feelings, and we'll give you some warnings before we get the spoilers. But we'll dive into it. Obviously, this is a movie that we've both seen before. It's one of the biggest pop culture things for our generation growing up, pretty much. So it's always weird to talk about these ones because it's like, well, what do you say? That if I feel like you've seen the movie so many times, like how do you go through it? But hey,
it's actually been a significantly long time since I have just sat down and watched this beginning to end, but I felt like at least every 5 minutes there was some line uttered that was just permeated through pop culture enough that it was always going to live in my mind eternally.
Yeah, so just before we get into it, I'll just remind you, if you are watching on YouTube, please do hit the like button if you're enjoying the show. It helps us out a bunch, and of course me and David do a couple of monthly bonus shows for patrons. So we'll tell you more about those at the end of the episode. But we'll get into Ghostbusters, which, the three guys decide to open up a ghost hunting business after they're kicked out of their university for doing a bunch of nonsense science that the university doesn't respect or agree with.
This movie is AKA How Do You Monetize the Afterlife? And who boy does it work.
Yeah, well, obviously the basic premise of Ghostbusters is you've got a police/fire station, whatever, that type of emergency service, but it's for catching ghosts. That's the basic premise of the thing. But when you watch the first one, and I think this is something that all the later movies or cartoons or everything that's being created because Ghostbusters is a pop culture phenomenon and they want to do more of it, is that this original movie is kind of this cynical money scheme, obviously not for all the characters, but for Peter Venkman especially, Bill Murray's character, he immediately just sees dollar signs, and when you pay attention to how he plays things throughout the movie, he's constantly just selling people things. He's putting on a show. He's constantly there's a line in the montage in the middle of this movie where he says no job is too big and no fee is too big, and I'm like, wait a minute, you don't get to decide that part. That's for your customers to decide if there's no fee that's too big.
I guess it's the idea that if only one company is selling a particular service in an industry, they can dictate whatever prices they want. They can just say ghost removal, that costs $10,000. Who's going to argue that?
You got to cover 4, then later in the movie 5 people's full-time salaries, and if they're only going to get one ghost job every couple of weeks, it has to cover quite a bit of time for these people, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
They're in the same sort of market as the Fabergé egg makers. There's only one sold every few years, but boy, do they make their money's worth.
Oh dear. I assume you like Ghostbusters just to get that part of the show done.
I guess, kinda. It's okay. Of course I do. This movie, I was actually shocked at how much, despite the fact I had seen this movie before, I was still finding myself genuinely laughing at the jokes as they came in. There's so many things that I wish I could have been in like an original theater showing when this first came out. Just before it permeated pop culture, before everybody knows how it went. I'd love to see how these jokes landed the first time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of jokes in it. Like, if you look at my viewings of this as a child, because, you know, I grew up watching this, and then the viewings from maybe my late teens onwards, where there was a lot of lines and jokes that hit differently, or I suddenly got the humor. Because I think this is the other thing, is that this was not necessarily designed from scratch to be a, like, fan favorite thing for kids. Obviously, it turned out there was a bunch of things they could make toys of, and it led to the cartoon and all those other things. But you know, there's lines in this movie that are straight up for adults. Like, you know, at one point someone says, "I want you inside me," and yeah, there's no sugarcoating what that means. Like, it just so that's like sprinkled in throughout. I mean, the line from early on in the movie, I don't want to quote too many things before we get to spoilers, but there's a line very, very early on which, you know, I don't know what my reaction was like when I was young. I assume I just didn't think anything of it, but the first time I watched this, maybe in my late teens or whenever that viewing was, when I was a bit older, and he asked the librarian, "Are you menstruating right now?" And the head librarian sort of peeks in and goes, "What's that got to do with anything?" And Bill Murray, completely deadpan, turns and goes, "Back off, I'm a scientist."
That was actually before we got to the Zool line. That was going to be my line pick at the beginning here. Back off, I'm a scientist. Because you're right, it's just so deadpan humor. It's fantastic the whole way through. I think this is one of the... I mean, Bill Murray's entire like comedy stylings is kind of in the same sort of vein, but this is one of the most like dry humor movies I've seen in a long, long time, where there is no real slapstick. It's more just, here's Bill Murray delivering a zinger over and over and over again, and it always manages to land.
And from what I understand, a lot of it was ad-lib. Like, he was, you know, I think this is something that happens a lot with comedies, but I think there's just a lot of different takes of him just doing different lines. Like, you know, the same moment happens, but his line responding to it, he'll do like maybe 5, 10, 15 versions of it, and then they'll just pick which one they think is the funniest to go into the final cut. It's very impressive.
There was a moment in this, it's towards the very end, so without spoiling anything, where Bill Murray's character is essentially like saying, "Okay, I didn't understand that bit. Explain it to me like I'm an idiot." And then Dan Aykroyd's character comes back and be like, "You didn't study." And there's just a half second before they cut where you see Bill Murray break. You see him just like start laughing as they cut away. And I feel like all the characters got to improv to some extent.
Yeah, I think this is the other thing about this movie, is that first and foremost it is a comedy, right? As much as it works as a movie with a fantastical plot about catching ghosts, and there's a third act where a big thing's happening and they have to save the city, as much as that's there, it is first and foremost a comedy, and it's written very dryly to kind of facilitate that. It's kind of impressive that it does work as a spectacle movie as well on top of that, and it's kind of why it stands out, I think, and sort of has stood the test of time and had this life that it's went into cartoons and sequels and all these other things.
I agree, but I do think that on a critical viewing of it, you can definitely tell that there is the scenes that are specifically forwarding the plot, and then there's scenes that are kind of the bit. There's scenes where it is a comedic scene and it's all working up towards one or even several punchlines. And because of that, I'd say definitely the first act, probably the first act and a half, kind of feel a bit more loosey-goosey. It doesn't feel like any one thing is leading into the next directly. It's only once you hit about the halfway point in the movie where it starts feeling like, okay, we're working up towards this bigger threat towards the end. And they still work in the comedy, but it's a lot less scenes devoted solely to the comedy.
I kind of agree and I kind of disagree, because I actually, watching it again, I was really paying attention. This movie's like an hour and 45, and it's very tightly paced, and I think every single scene in that first half that you were kind of saying there, I think it all does advance the story. All of it's setting up why they're doing what they're doing, how they're setting it up, introducing the new characters that are relevant to what's happening later. It's just that the actual big threat that the last act's about isn't really brought up until, halfway through the movie.
I guess it's poor wording on my part. It's not so much that the scenes don't set up the story. Everything, like you said, tightly written. It all works for the story. It's specifically the threat itself only shows up like halfway through.
Yeah.
And then they have to deal with that.
Which is fine. And I think it's something that I think a lot of comedies have to deal with. Like, I just watched this week No Hard Feelings, that Jennifer Lawrence movie that came out last year. And that had the same thing, where it's this very comedy... It's a comedy overall, but it's a very comedy-focused first half. But then as it gets into its second half, and they actually want to, like, build to an ending where they have kind of a climax and sort of, we've told a story about these characters, the jokes kind of slow down and get kind of less so in the back half.
Right.
And I think a lot of comedies suffer from that. I don't think Ghostbusters does, for two reasons. One, it's still very funny, the entire back half of the movie. But two, the actual spectacle it turns into, because I feel like when a comedy does that, usually it turns into a mediocre drama to try and like end the story. Here, it's actually a really good, like, fantastical plot about saving the city, and there's a lot of really cool moments, and there's I wouldn't say cool action per se, I wouldn't quite say that, but there's a lot of fun effects. There's a lot of there's some stop motion, there's a lot of great matte paintings, there's, optical effects, all these kind of things, and they all look good. I'm not saying they all look realistic, but they all look good, and that I think is a big difference between some modern effects where you get just like, if you get like a bad CG or green screen thing, it just looks bad.
Yeah, I think that each of the ghosts, as we see them individually, all look great. I don't think there's any of them that stand out as like bad, but there are a few effects, especially as we're just hitting the third act, where it feels very 80s. It's not that it's bad, but it's definitely of the time.
Oh yeah, I love it. Like I think I know exactly the thing you're talking about, and it sticks out. But I kind of love the charm of it because it does feel so of that era. It's kind of, I think what impresses me is, as well, watching this again, is how it kind of handles its cast of characters, where Venkman is probably the closest to the lead character. He gets a little bit more time, and that's probably just because he's actually the one who's maybe trying to pursue a love interest, whereas the others don't really have something separate from being a Ghostbuster.
Yeah.
But I think by the time you get to the end and you've got the four Ghostbusters assembled to take on the threat, the movie's done this kind of neat thing where it gives you the first big adventure, but it's before Winston's added to the cast. So you get kind of this twofer in the third act where it's like, okay, you've got the full lineup of four Ghostbusters, they're doing a big thing, and they've successfully told us that they've been working consistently via montage and whatnot, but none of it feels repetitive because we've not been like doing, this is them going out to their second call in the movie, their third call. It's very wise with how it dishes out its plot beats and how it uses those things. And part of that's probably a cost-saving measure because, hey, there's only so many big effect sequences we want to do to save money. True. But sometimes those are the things that lead to things feeling a bit tighter because you're having to pick your moments a bit more wisely.
The Jaws effect, one would say. If you don't have the money to do a specific effect, you just don't show it and it make it work for you instead of against.
Yeah. In the movie shooting somewhat in New York. I mean, I'm not sure. There's definitely some scenes that are definitely in the city. I'm not sure like how much of the sets and stuff were. Maybe the interiors were shot elsewhere or whatever. But there's at least one part where they must have recreated like a part of a street because obviously the road like kind of like breaks up and does a bunch of things. So they must have recreated a bit. If not possibly that part of the street was just always the fake thing they made the whole movie. I'm not sure.
I'm looking at the filming locations on IMDb, and basically it's all just either they were on location in New York or they were on a soundstage in LA. Yeah,
that sounds about right. Yeah, cool. So, no, like Ghostbusters is very good, and I don't think anyone's going to be shocked and appalled to hear us say that.
So there is one thing that I was paying special attention to this time around, and I guess it doesn't have so much to do with the movie, but it is something that's part of the fanfare that is Ghostbusters, and that is the soundtrack, specifically the licensed music that plays. And obviously, everybody knows the Ghostbusters theme. Like everyone, it's everywhere.
I would say there's two other really memorable songs in this as well, actually.
Oh, all right. Because that's the point I was going to argue, is that I didn't find any of the songs memorable on this soundtrack. I don't think I've ever heard anybody reference any of the other songs in any capacity.
I mean,
maybe I'm just in different circles.
I've not heard of them in different contexts, but I remember them vividly from this movie. Like,
okay,
there's a song that plays as the third act's kicking off, which is very memorable, and then there's a song called "Saving the Day" by Alessi that plays kind of in the build-up to the big sort of finale, which is very memorable because of the part of the movie it plays in. And they use it a few times as well. They actually do a few bars of it, like a couple of scenes earlier, which I didn't remember, and I was like, oh, they played it a little bit early. I wasn't expecting that. I'd forgotten that.
I remember hearing each of the songs as they were in the movie, but maybe it's just I haven't watched it as much as you. You tell me to sing a few bars right now, I could not at all. Whereas the Ghostbusters theme, that entire thing is imprinted in my brain from beginning to end.
I mean, I can't sing anything, but I can do dun 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 dun.
Pete, stop! It's too close to copyright. You're running the gamble here.
I mean, it's in my head. I could do it easily.
No, yeah, exactly.
I think there's a few memorable songs in there. I think the score is pretty good as well.
Mm-hmm. The score reminded me of something. There was some other track every time they did like the little, God, I forgot the musical term for it, but like the musical cue that always plays every time, the lead motif. That's it. Every time they play that little motif, I heard another score like starting in my head. And it reminded me of something, but by the end of the movie, I still couldn't place it. It's going to drive me insane.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're thinking of. I can't help you.
But like, there's no way I can even like describe it, because otherwise it'd just be the Ghostbusters score. Like, I can't. There's no way for me to search this.
My best bet for you would be to look at the composer, look what else he's done, because there's a good chance it's the same composer. It's not a guarantee, but there's a reasonable chance.
Yeah. Give it a shot.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure who did composing on this. I'll check. Continue.
Yeah, no, I think, one of the things, again, that a lot of the later stuff dwells on too much, but is something to be very, very commended in the first film, is just how seemingly effortless it creates an entire suite of, outfits and props, the proton packs, the traps, of course, the cars, arguably the most iconic movie cars, that and the DeLorean, kind of, go blow for blow as to which one's actually the more favorited by people.
1 year right after another, 84 to 85. That was a good year for car props.
Yeah, and I think I like the practicality of some of it. Like, the car's just a hearse that's been turned into the Ecto-1. So and one of the details I like about it, you see later on in the movie, is that they've got like a rack that has all the proton packs on it, and it's literally just the slidey thing for the coffin that would be in the hearse anyway. Yeah. And I thought that's a neat little touch. This is how they've transformed it into this. Mm-hmm. I think those little details are very good, and I do think later movies, like, they have too much reverence for all this stuff, where they treat it all like it's special, and part of what makes it work in this movie and feel kind of cool is they don't dwell on it. They don't focus on most of it. The car gets a little bit of a spotlight, but, like, the only time they really focus on the proton packs as a thing is played for a joke, because they're scared of it, because it might cause a nuclear explosion.
Yeah, it's literally everything in this movie is shown to us to be the cheapest, jankiest, junkiest thing that they could manage to make work. And that goes from their car to the proton packs to their place that they like start out in. All of it is just jank that they've managed to duct tape together. So the idea that these later movies will come in and be like, oh, but this is like our holy text. This is the thing that is revered above all others. It's like, bro, they literally said in the movie they bought it for like $1.50.
Yeah, I mean, the later movies, like, obviously we're going to do them all, so I don't want to get too much into this, and I'll have refreshed points to make once we watch them. Yes. But from memory, the 2016 movie straight up does a montage of how they make all the things, or how they develop them all, because it has to do the origin of all the things. Yeah. Whereas Afterlife, it's like a slow motion shot of the proton pack and close-ups of all the lights turning on, because this magical thing that you all remember from Ghostbusters. But you watch this movie, and it's just something they have, and it's neat that it's there. It's just good prop work because it's memorable without being this like annoying focus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things.
I will definitely have more words on that in a month's time.
Yes, I'm sure we will have many things to say about the later movies. It's actually one of the things that I was thinking about as I was watching this is that it's kind of wild because Dan Aykroyd for years and years after Ghostbusters 2 was trying to will Ghostbusters 3 into existence, and it never quite happened. You know, obviously eventually there was another Ghostbusters movie, but not in that form with the original cast and all that.
Yeah.
And all I could think is that if the executives of today were in charge, there is no way there wouldn't have been a Ghostbusters 3. Like, because look at them right now. Like, they're trying to make it this franchise. It's this consistent thing that they can keep selling merch for, that they can keep bringing movies out for. There'll probably be a TV show at some point. Like, it's bound to happen because that's the world we live in now. And it's just nuts to me that Ghostbusters 2, well, it may not have been as successful as the first one, I can't imagine them giving up. Like, the executives today, I can't imagine giving up after Ghostbusters 2. You know, and maybe some of the cast didn't want to do it or whatever. That's always possible. But...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like that was a thing of Bill Murray was basically like, I've done my time, whatever. I don't need to worry about it again.
Yeah.
Until they give him, like, an actual boatload of money.
Yeah, but today they would, though. In fact, they have done.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I pulled up the Sony Picture Franchises Wikipedia page, and like every single thing on this page has had a new installment within the last 10 years. There's not a single thing that they've let just simmer for any period of time.
Yeah, they brought Bad Boys back. They brought Men in Black back.
I see Charlie's Angels has had a few reboots there. Terminator, for better or for worse.
I mean, that's not only theirs. That's bounced around, but you know. Yeah. And don't even get me started on Madame Web.
Oh yeah. I can't wait to see that. And by see that, I mean have other people see that, and I get to experience the reaction.
Yes, I don't want to see it either. That's just it is nuts because I think it's in the era where everything, like all the studios are trying to build their franchises, and you know, obviously Disney kind of got there to the party in a big way first, and then Warner Brothers went, oh shit, we've been really sitting on all this DC stuff, we better get this all going, and we've got Harry Potter and blah blah blah. I love that Sony turned and looked at the library and went, Ghostbusters, that's what we've got, we should do something with that. And it's the same thing like Paramount, and be like, oh, more Mission Impossible sounds like a good idea, let's do more of those. But Ghostbusters is very much Sony's biggest one, I would argue. At least from a pop culture perspective, I think it's their biggest one.
I mean, I'd argue because of the joint rights of Spider-Man, but yeah, Ghostbusters is the biggest standalone, for sure.
Spider-Man's a weird one because it's like they make the movies, but it's not theirs.
Right.
So, yeah, okay, I admit, Spider-Man technically, but that said, though, they keep making these shitty spin-offs, and that's going to keep devaluing... What
are you talking about? I need my Morbius 3, damn it.
Look, I saw a rumor, right, on Twitter about Madame Web, and I have to share, is that apparently there's a line in the movie where someone says...
I saw this, yeah.
When you're responsible, you gain great power. Or something to that effect.
It's just the opposite of what Uncle Ben said.
Which makes no goddamn sense.
It sounds to me like Sony was like, hey, guys, I'm going to run this through Google Translate a few times, and then I'm going to see what we get back out. And that's just what happened here. They fed in the original line and were like, when you are responsible, great power is had.
Mm-hmm. All right. Obviously, another big thing here is the cast. We mentioned Bill Murray, of course, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis. I'll mention them together because they're also the writers of the movie. They co-wrote this film. So
I feel like the base script was Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, but then they had to give Bill Murray a writing credit for all of his improv.
I don't think he actually has a writing credit, though.
Does he not? Oh, no. That's Rick Moranis on there, which that's a shock, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think he probably ad-libbed a lot, but actors don't tend to get writing credits for ad-libbing.
True.
I mean, Harold Ramis, obviously, he's like, everyone knows him as Egon, but he was more of a writer and director largely throughout his career. So, it's kind of weird because obviously Ivan Reitman, who directed the movie, he went on to do a bunch of comedies with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I really like, two of them actually. Like I love Twins and Kindergarten Cop. Junior's a bit less so, and he even kind of did like a sort of almost like a reattempt at a Ghostbusters with a movie called Evolution that was about aliens in the early 2000s.
I remember that coming out. Like I remember when Blockbuster was a thing. I see it, but I never actually watched it.
Yeah, I saw that in theaters in 2001.
I'm so sorry.
But I think it's interesting because I think this is probably the best direction he's ever done, Ivan Reitman. And I think part of that is because he is making this movie that's not just a comedy, even though it's a comedy first. And that leads to, you know, having fun with the ghosts and having fun with the suspense of the not so much the horror suspense, like nothing in here's actually scary, but the idea that, like, you know, when they're in the library and they're sort of sneaking up and they're looking for her, there's a little bit of a spooky tension of it, kind of like the anticipation of them actually encountering the thing, you know?
Yeah.
So that's obviously our fourth Ghostbusters, Ernie Hudson, who joins them partway through the movie.
I love his character because he is just 100% of like, yeah, I'm just the new guy. Like it's pretty much established at a point of, at this point, Bill Murray's character, who's kind of been the audience avatar with Dan Aykroyd explaining stuff to him and Harold Ramis explaining stuff to him, he's now fully experienced. So we need to introduce a new audience avatar for these further explanations we're going to have to throw out here.
I think it's partly that. I think they've always explained it as they wanted this idea of it growing, so they wanted like an everyman. Like, as much as Bill Murray's character does act as an avatar and that he doesn't obviously know all the things the other two know, he is still a scientist. He still is aware of things. I think the point of Winston, Ernie Hudson's character, is that he is just a working man. He does just show up, get the job, and is sort of thrust into this world.
Yeah.
We have Rick Moranis as the neighbor. I don't know why I went to him first, because I should have mentioned Sigourney Weaver first, because that's who he's neighbors to. But she is the love interest. She's also the one who kind of gets mixed up in the main ghost plot of the movie, which is why she ends up interacting with the Ghostbusters. And she's very good. It's kind of funny to think of this as post Alien, so this is like she's already a star for something here.
I love looking at Sigourney Weaver's like entire filmography, because there are certain things where she's like super well known for, and then other times she's just like, yeah, remember I was super well known in that, and now I'm starring in this tiny little thing, because why not? I can do whatever I want. I was Ripley.
Yeah, I probably saw her in this first, because I definitely saw Ghostbusters at a younger age than I did Alien, but obviously...
I mean, I would hope so. It's a much more child-appropriate film.
But I do definitely think of her as Ripley first. Like, you know, that even seeing that later, like, that has completely overtaken what I think of her as.
That's fair.
She's good in this. She's kind of the straight woman. I think one of the things, you know, going back to a comedy like this from the 80s, is you're kind of worried that is there going to be some stuff that doesn't hold up, you know, that well, in terms of, you know, like Venkman is very kind of flirty with her, and but he never crosses a line. You know, he does sort of come on a bit strong, shall we say, but her kind of attitude towards him, I think, always makes it feel okay.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a dual-sided coin between Venkman and then Rick Moranis' character, Lewis, where both of them have the hots for Sigourney Weaver's character, and both of them just take it like a little bit too far in terms of she's represented not so as her own character first, but more so as the love interest. And then I like you said, it never feels like it goes beyond a point where it becomes like, oh yeah, we were so different back in the 80s, and like there's no way that would ever fly today. But it does give off just a little bit of a vibe that it like almost danced that close, you know?
I think Moranis' character is just, you know, the running joke with him is that he's the neighbor across the hall, and every time she walks past his place, he's always listening for her, so he'll jump out and try and talk to her. And that's
Which seems weird.
Yeah, it's just very keen, but he obviously he seems like an innocent little guy. I think the way she reacts to both of them makes me feel better about it. The thing with Venkman, of course, is that he's just been a bit inappropriate because he's he goes to her place to investigate as a professional, because he's investigating the ghost stuff, and he's dropping little one-liners about, oh, here's the bedroom, and she's like, oh, nothing happened in there. That's a shame. And it, it's like, yeah, okay, like that line would get you in trouble if you actually said that in real life.
Oh yeah, as a professional.
Like, she rolls her eyes at it, don't get me wrong, but
I guess the key here is that throughout it, it's all in good fun. It never feels like any character is really actually put out by any of this. Like, obviously, she immediately like rejects him 100%, just tells him, get out of here, I don't want anything to do with you. But it's not done in a mean way. It's not done in a way where she obviously like never wants to see him again. She obviously had some level of attraction to him. So yeah, it's all in good fun.
Yeah. And and he does go. It's not like he fights that much. He just he kind of sticks his head in the door to get one last little line in before he goes. But there's nothing, like I say, it never goes that far. Because it was when he started making those little comments, I went, oh, maybe this might just skirt over a line.
Right.
But it never quite did.
No.
So yeah, then we have Janine, played by Annie Potts, who's the sort of the receptionist of the Ghostbusters.
I always, I guess it never existed, but I always kind of assumed I just missed the scene where they hired her on. But she just appeared. She just came with the building, as far as I could tell.
I mean, I don't think you need it to be explained. I mean, you see her there and you get that they've hired someone. Like, especially since, they skip over a lot of things like that, where obviously we see them looking at the building before they buy it, but there's other things they don't explain. You just sort of, you expect to just get that they've taken these steps.
I don't need it to be explained. I just, because it's been so long since I've seen it, I always thought that there was a scene where she got hired on. And then there just wasn't. I was like, oh, okay, never mind.
I know there was like 18 minutes of deleted scenes in the extras, which I probably watched way back in like the DVD days, but I can't remember if that was one of the scenes that were there, if there was ever anything like that. I guess the only character left to really mention is Peck, who's like this, health and safety guy who comes in and causes some problems for the team.
We'll get to him more as he comes up in the story, but there's this running trend for a while online where everyone kind of was like, nah, he was right. He was right. He was doing his job well, and there's no reason he should have been treated the way he did. I'm going to disagree in that he may have been right, but he was an absolute dick about it.
Yes.
The whole way through.
Yes, he was technically right about one thing, but he is such an insufferable prick about how he goes about it. I don't feel particularly bad. This is the same guy who went on to play the prick in Die Hard, the newsman. So he kind of got typecast a little bit for a while.
I mean, as long as he got paid, take it.
Oh, sure, yeah. I'm sure he was thrilled to be a part of both Ghostbusters and Die Hard. It looks good on the old resume, doesn't it?
I do. That's the other thing that I kind of wish that I was around in '84 when this first came out. I want to know, like, how it was marketed, like, was this like the tent pole of the season? Did they put all of their, I think it was Columbia that distributed this, did they put all of their eggs in that basket and say everyone needs to see Ghostbusters, this is our big thing of the year? Or was it kind of like, here's a fun comedy film that you can enjoy or not enjoy?
I mean, I don't know for sure. I mean, I've seen the posters, I've seen the trailer. I think it looks very marketable. Like, you can slap that logo on a poster, and I'm sure one of the posters is just the logo on the poster.
Oh, yeah.
With this summer or next year or whatever it would have been, and probably made people curious. And it helps that Bill Murray certainly was already well known for this coming out. If not, maybe also Dan Aykroyd. I'd have to go back and sort of look at their filmographies. And
Dan Aykroyd, I mean, they were both from SNL, or was it SNL? It was whatever, one of those comedy shows. Dan Aykroyd was on Blues Brothers before this, and then...
Oh, of course, so he was already a star. Yeah, Blues Brothers.
And Bill Murray had Caddyshack, so definitely big comedy hits throughout.
Yeah, so they were both kind of at their height almost. Well, Dan Aykroyd was at his height. Bill Murray had a longer height. He was actually very successful for a long time. Dan Aykroyd, obviously had Ghostbusters 2, and he was in a lot of things. There's a reason
that Dan Aykroyd was pushing so hard for Ghostbusters 3. We'll just leave it at that.
Then he's got his Crystal Skull vodka. He made his film that he directed, which absolutely horrible. I saw that for the first time last year.
I'm not familiar with that one.
called Nothing But Trouble. He was really obsessed with people like playing multiple characters, wearing fat suits, and lots of disgusting eating scenes. It was not pleasant.
Oh God, it doesn't look pleasant. Ugh, all right, never mind.
No, even Chevy Chase couldn't save it.
Wow, what a damning indignation that is.
Yeah, just a really, really weird movie. Yeah, it's funny actually. Like obviously this movie was part of the childhood, as was the second one. We'll talk about that next time.
Yep.
I remember like when Harold Ramis passed away. Probably a good decade ago now, or close to, I imagine.
I think so. Yeah, hold on.
Yeah. It's been
2014. Yep.
Yeah, exactly a decade. I nailed it.
There you go.
And possibly even close to this time of year. And the reason why I say that is because I remember watching the Oscars that year, and when Bill Murray was presenting an award, he threw in a little nod to him, and it was kind of sweet because those two had fallen out like sometime around or after Groundhog Day. They didn't speak for a long time. I don't know if it was during that movie or something that happened a bit later, but they went years without talking to each other. And I think they patched things up before his death, but it was just kind of a nice like thing. And I think on the list of like actors and people that I just grew up watching in certain movies, like he probably was one of the first to, I think after him, it wasn't too long before Bill Paxton went, and that one hit me as well. Like just some of these faces that just mean a little bit more because of the movies I grew up watching, and it makes you realize, oh shit, maybe I'm getting kind of old now because a lot of the people I grew up watching are really up there in age.
Yeah, I mean, but we'll get to it when we get there, but that's kind of one of my things that I have against the newer Ghostbusters.
Oh yeah.
Movies
I've got thoughts.
Is just the full thing of like, hey everyone, look how old these people you grew up on are. That means you're old too.
Yeah, doesn't make me feel good.
Nah. Just to be clear, Harold Ramis died exactly 1 week and 10 years ago.
Damn, okay.
February 24th. So, yep.
All right. All right, well, I guess we'll say spoilers so we can just talk about the whole movie now, just in case for some reason you're someone who hasn't seen Ghostbusters. I suspect 99.99% of you have. But for that one person,
I will say, at least in the US, it is not available for streaming easily. It's not on one of like the big tentpole streaming services. I had to actually rent this one. So
yeah,
get your DVDs circulating.
It's 2024. At least have a Blu-ray. Jesus Christ, DVD. High definition.
I don't like to assume that a Blu-ray has been made for any movie, but I guess with Ghostbusters, yeah, that would make sense.
It definitely has. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like relying on streaming services anyway. There's always just random movies that aren't on one of them. Sometimes even big movies like Ghostbusters, apparently. So
yeah,
just Anyway, yes, Ghostbusters. I mean, yeah, I guess we go through it.
Yeah,
I
mean, I can't. Maybe you remember it well enough to do each scene exactly in order, but otherwise, I'm just gonna go broad strokes because it bounces a little bit at the beginning.
I mean, I don't know if I'm going to do every little scene in order, but I think broadly I can remember the gist of the order. It all starts one afternoon with a meek, quiet librarian.
Should I get the like ASMR music playing in the background?
Walking in the basement level of the New York City Library. And then she shits herself as cards start flying out the drawers and she sees a ghost.
I was actually kind of amazed for just like a fraction of a second when the Ghostbusters logo comes up. They play the theme song.
Yeah?
Like just for like a bar or two, but I was like, wow, I thought they were going to build to that, but no, it's just right there at the beginning.
Well, it wasn't iconic yet. It was the first movie, so
I guess, yeah. I was shocked that they didn't, because I knew it was in that montage scene. I remember it there, but the fact they also played it over the opening title, I was like, right.
It's just a couple of bars of the music. There's no singing at the start. You hear it in the montage in the middle, and then you hear it again at the ending. And so, rule of threes.
Yeah, fair.
Actually, the thing that got me off guard with the title, and it always does when I watch this again, is that it's split over two lines. It says Ghost and then Busters, and that's weird to me. Right. because you never see it written like that anymore. Like ever since Ghostbusters 2, it's always been a singular line, like one big word, and it is still technically one word. But in the title screen of this original movie, they split it over 2 lines, and that just looks weird to me.
Whoever was in the editing room didn't get the style guide from marketing. They were promptly fired.
Yeah. So we're introduced to Peter Venkman as he's doing a psychology, or I say psychology, a telekinesis. Not telekinesis. Sorry,
telepathy.
That's the word I was looking for.
But yeah, they're called parapsychologists, which is to say psychology, but like not approved.
And the joke here, of course, is that he's got 2 students that have volunteered to take this test where he's doing little electric shocks when they get something wrong. He's showing them cards, or to be more precise, he's not showing them the cards, and they're guessing the shape that's on the cards.
Yep.
And he keeps shocking the guy, but because he thinks the girl's pretty, he keeps just telling her she's right, and that's the joke of the scene. Which, to be fair, sets up that he's a bit of a, I don't know if playboy's the right word, but he's certainly a bit of a flirter.
A womanizer.
Yeah.
I love in this scene the fact that it's, again, rule of 3s. And on the 3rd time, the guy actually gets it right.
He does,
but
yeah.
Bill Murray isn't even paying attention. He's just like, nope, you suck.
I love as well, if you're paying attention to it, obviously because he's getting them wrong, he always flips the card to show that he's wrong, but when she's doing it, he doesn't flip the card, and notably when he gets it right, oh, sorry, the card just goes down. You don't get to see it. It's very good. I love that when Dan Aykroyd comes in, when Stantz comes in, and he says, hey, we need to talk, something happened at the library, and he doesn't want to talk to him. He's like, no, I'm talking to a pretty girl. Like, this is going well. I'm colluding with a student. And there's a moment here where he jumps and slaps Dan Aykroyd on the head, and I'm like, how does she not hear that? He just slapped the man on the top of his head.
I mean, of course she heard it. She just knows better to mind her own business so she can get that $5.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing. The guy gets him mad and says, you can keep your $5. It storms out, and I'm like, you agreed to do like 75 shock tests for $5?
That was 84 money. In today's money, that's like $15.
That still seems too low. Especially since Bill Murray says, hey, we're paying you for your time, aren't we? $5 for like, what, 2 hours of this bullshit? No way. Come on now.
Well, he has to start getting them right. There you go.
Oh dear. Actually, I get a little disgusted in this scene because the guy, like, he spits out his chewing gum by accident when he gets shocked, and he puts it back in, and I'm like, that's gross.
It's 5-second rule. He's fine.
Oh, that's 5-second rules, a bunch of nonsense.
5-second rule in this disused closet in the back of the university. Clearly fine.
Oh dear. I think the zingers though really start coming when they go to the library. Because I already mentioned, of course, the "Are you menstruating" line. But everything here, but them bantering with each other, going down into the basement, and just the looks they're giving each other, and I think the key thing, the key narrative of this scene on its own is, and this is what's so great about the opening of this movie, is that Bill Murray goes into this scene a non-believer. He is clearly a skeptic and doesn't believe that he's going to see a ghost.
Yeah, the entire thing that he's in this job for is that it essentially is a non-job, because he works for the university along with these guys. They get paid to run, like, quote-unquote studies, which, as we've seen, Bill Murray, he just, like, randomly shocks students and hits on the pretty ones. He's able to do that and get paid. That's the whole reason he's doing any of this.
Absolutely. He's basically Saul Goodman, right? That's
yeah.
He's Saul Goodman with just a Bill Murray charm kind of slapped on top of him. But he like, Egon asked him to get a sample at one point here, and I love watching the physical acting from Bill Murray here, as he's just trying to scoop up this goo, this ectoplasm, without touching it, but then he gets some of it on his fingers, so he just starts like wiping it on the books, and like he gets some on his shoe, so he starts wiping the book with his shoe.
Yeah, even the first flick he does, you can tell he meant to like totally flick it away, but a tiny bit gets onto like his forehead, and he fully reacts to that. He's like, God, Jesus.
And it does make you wonder, like, how much of, like, obviously it starts intentional, but something like that, could he have planned for that? Was he expecting?
I don't think so, yeah.
It seems like a genuine moment.
Yeah, I feel like so much of this is just improv. I'd love to see what the actual shooting script said, because I have to imagine every like 4 lines is just parentheses, Bill does something funny.
Yeah. And I think there's a lesson here, though, when we get to the 2016 movie, because I think that movie has a lot of ad lib in it, but it's you can tell it's a lot of ad lib in a really negative way. And I think there's a charm here to it never slows anything down. It's always these quick zingers. It's always advancing things, and it feels tight in the way it's edited. Whereas the 2016 movie, from what I remember, has a lot of like, oh, we're just going to keep dancing for another minute for no reason. So
I think that's also just kind of like a sign of the times, where these 80s movies, they had a lot of like those quick zinger lines. That was kind of just the humor of the time. Whereas I feel like as you get further and further out and you start getting like internet humor, it starts delving into like absurdism and cringe humor, and it's just how long can we just hold on a shot?
Yeah. So not looking forward to that one, if I'm honest. But
yeah, you know what? Let's put an embargo on the 2016 one for 2 weeks. No talking about that anymore.
Yeah. So, one of my favorite little moments here, because they see the books all stacked up, and Bill Murray cracks a little joke. He's like, yeah, no one else could have done that. But they're just walking around this corner, and a bookcase behind them just falls down, and it's like Venkman's suddenly starting to think, maybe there's actually something going on here. He's like, have you ever seen anything like that, Ray? And he's like, mm-mm. And then Egon's like, mm-mm.
It's like, all right, cool, moving on.
And thus starts a joke that's paid off in the finale, where Venkman sends Ray out to talk to the ghost. This happens again in the very final big thing that happens at the end. But he
well, Ray goes in first because they see the ghost just standing there, and he comes out and he's like, "Hey, you come here often?" Like he tries to like talk to the ghost as he would any
that's
other
Venkman,
woman.
you mean? Venkman goes out and tries to chat her up. Yeah, you said Ray.
Yeah. Oh, my bad. Yeah, Venkman does that, and then when it's not working, he comes back and Ray's like, "All right, I have an idea."
And his idea is to just sneak up behind her, and he yells, "Get her!" And then the ghost goes scary, and they run away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's that. I mean, that's the scene. But it's. I think it sets up the personalities of the three characters very well, right? Peter's the sleazy skeptic, right, who's out for himself. Ray's this genuine believer who's fascinated, and then Egon's like the uber nerd who's got the tech and is very deadpan.
Yeah, I was going to say this scene, and pretty much any scene that Egon's in, he's kind of there just to exposit how the tech works, but he does it in such, like, again, the driest humor possible. Like, he does it in a funny way, but if you try describing why it's funny, it doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, there's a moment when they first meet him, right? Right after Peter does the whole books thing, when he's got the stethoscope on the table, where he's like, you know, I'm the one that has to stop you from all your crazy ideas. There's that one time you wanted to drill a hole in your head. And Egon just dryly turns and says, and that would have worked if you hadn't stopped me.
Yeah. But it's purely in the delivery that line works.
Yeah, like me saying it is not funny at all, but the way he says it, it's just Harold Ramis just being himself, or being Egon, I guess, that just makes it work. It's just perfect the way it's delivered.
I think it's right after this scene, as they're kind of like reconvening in a park, talking about what their next steps are. We have Venkman turning to Egon after he's like, all right, I'm convinced this is happening. And he like offers him a candy bar or something. And he says, Egon, I'm going to take back some of the things I said about you. And he like, Egon's just so happy to have this candy bar. I love that sequence.
Yeah, I think he says you've earned it.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Do you just feed him candy bars every time he pulls something off?
He's just like a science room pet sort of thing.
But, I mean, Venkman's already starting to think, okay, well, how can we use this we're going to get prizes, we're going to make money, we're going to do this thing. And then the university, when they get back there, it turns out that they've all been fired. They're not going to fund the research projects anymore because they're a bunch of quacks, as far as they're concerned. And they have to go and, you know, so it's like, well, how are we going to get money? How are we going to fund this new enterprise that we want to try and explore? Cut to Ray being forced, that's Stance for the record, just in case I'm jumping between names here. Ray has been talked into taking out a mortgage on his house that his parents left him. A third mortgage at that.
A third mortgage. And such a good line delivery. It's just like, oh, my parents bought me that house. And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. Everyone has a third mortgage nowadays.
Yes.
And then he comes back with like, and you didn't even negotiate with the guy. You just took whatever rate he gave us.
Egon's quiet, except he chimes in at one point and says, the interest on the first 3 years alone amounts to $95,000. And again,
it's a good thing their business works out.
That's 1984 money as well, mate.
True. That's $1 million now.
Yeah,
not actually, but
yeah, and it goes through things quite quickly here. We see the fire station that they're going to get, and there's kind of a running gag here as well, actually, where Ray keeps wanting things like he's a kid. Because, Venkman and Egon are like, oh, this place is horrible, it's a death trap. Egon lists like 10 things that are wrong with it. But then Ray comes down the pole and goes, this pole's great, we'll take it.
I feel like this scene does more to give Ray a character, even in the earlier ones, where it just shows that he's the guy who has like the childlike wonder. He's the guy who ghosts are real, and he's just ecstatic over the idea of that. He doesn't, it's like, yeah, the scientific implications, blah blah blah, but he's like, ghosts are real, man, that's awesome.
Oh, he's super excited. And I love how they've already got terminology as if they've been doing this for years. Like, even in the library scene, or when he's explaining it to Venkman, he's like, oh, a class 4 torso vapor, full motion, or something. He says something like that, but it's all these words strung together. It sounds really scientific and official. And I'm like, all you're describing is a freaking ghost. That's it.
That's a class 4 to be fair, I wonder if there was like some level of behind the scenes how they chose the terminology, because obviously as we go through the movie, the librarian looking ghost is a hell of a lot different than like Slimer.
Sure,
like,
yes.
They are very different types of ghosts. So I wonder if there is some consistent terminology if you really looked at the script.
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, it's probably around here. We cut to Dana for the first time.
Yeah.
I think it's about here. Because they're getting set up, and we cut to... I think she's watching like their ad, right? She comes in and
she gets in off the street, she got groceries, and then she meets up with Lewis out in the hall, who basically tells her like, oh yeah, you left your TV on. I was gonna go in and fix it, but you locked the door, so I just turned mine up real loud anyway.
Also,
and he just does this whole long bambling thing.
I love that he invites her in for a glass of mineral water. Like, that's such a weird thing to say. Come in for that. Like, come into my home for water. Like, I get offering water when they're already at your place, but come in for a mineral water. I'm pretty sure she has water. She lives across the hall.
Oh, but not mineral water. That's what you really need in order to stay hydrated. I also really love this running joke they've got going on, where every time he leaves his apartment, he gets locked out.
I love that. I love that he has this thing, and he always talks about the fact that he's an accountant and like you should, you do your own taxes, but you really shouldn't do that. But you should come to my party. But I love there's a bit later on during the party where some people arrive at his door and he welcomes them in and he just starts announcing all of their tax information. He's like, he's got this job and she's got this deferred loan from years ago and they've got $15,000 left on their house. And I'm like, why are you telling all these strangers?
Because that's literally all he knows about them.
Well, yeah, there's a line about how this is all clients at the party because then he can write it off for his taxes as a work thing.
Someone asks like, "Oh, hey, do you have any Tylenol?" He's like, "No, I got the generic brand because I can get 600 compared to 300 for the same price. That's good business." Such a fun character.
Yeah, and I feel like so much of this is just it's Rick Moranis just delivering the lines in such a way that he's just so endearing as this goofy little character.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it just strikes me as him. I'm sure he's not actually this geeky in real life, but it's just how I see him all the time.
Oh, sure. But yeah, he invites Dana to his party that he's having on whatever night, and she's like, I'll try and stop by, kind of thing. But she sees the ad for Ghostbusters on the TV, which, at this point, they're not really proven yet or anything. And then she goes into the kitchen to put away her groceries, and this is one of these like vivid memories from the movie that always stick out to me, is this visual of the eggs like sort of like cracking out of the box, and just cooking on the counter. And I'm imagining like how they did this, where they had like a counter that was basically just like a heating plate, and like they were probably like just cooking the eggs literally on the counter. I'm imagining the logistics of actually pulling this scene off, because it's all practical. It's all there in camera.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a practical effect. I don't know about whether the counter was actually like a stovetop or whatever. I guess it's possible. I more so imagine that they just like pressurized the eggs to get them to explode out, but
yeah, but then they start cooking on the counter.
Yeah, that's the part, like, I'm not sure how that would work. Maybe it's not even eggs at that point. Maybe they change it out for something else, but beats me.
Either way, it's a fun moment, and then of course she opens her fridge and sees the portal to another dimension.
Yeah.
And the big dog demon, and then does it say Zul or Gozar? I can't remember.
It does say Zul.
Zul, it says, okay. So yeah. I
do absolutely love, though, with the egg sequence, is that you don't notice it until you're rewatching the movie, just how many little subtle ads there are for Stay Puft marshmallow brand throughout this movie. Like every once in a while, it'll just be like off to the side. It'll just get it in your head so that it's there whenever you need something to pop into your head at the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. Especially since it is a fake thing that the movie made up, where I grew up just assuming this was something the US had. I assumed this was a real thing.
No, I'd love to have that. Are you kidding me? That'd be fantastic, but nope.
Yeah. So she goes to the Ghostbusters headquarters, and Ray's still working on the car.
Apparently it's been like 2 days since this happened. She's just been kind of avoiding her apartment since then.
I guess she's freaked out. She's not willing to accept it's a real thing. But I have to work up a bit of courage to actually go and explain that this happened, because she's going to sound crazy. And this is actually where we first get our first proper meeting with Janine, I think, as well, because we see Venkman come in, and she sort of has some quick back and forth with him. And he kind of insults her and then apologizes and says he'll be in his office, but he keeps talking like they've got a big business, even though they've not had a single customer yet. But Dana comes in, and Venkman, I love, like, this is one of these just little moments that's just vivid in my memory, is Bill Murray leaping over the little fence, the little gate, to get out front to like welcome her and, you know, start asking her questions about what's going on. Dear. But anyway, so they all sit around, hear her story, talk about some possibilities, whatever, and Venkman's like, I'll go back to her place and check her out. I'll go back to her place and check out her apartment. Yeah. So
immediately the eye rolls, just like, okay, we know how this is going.
Yeah. Alex, one of the lines she has when he's going around, I compared him to Saul Goodman, but she compares him to a game show host, which I guess...
Yeah.
I guess I could see that comparison.
Yeah, she specifically says, like, you don't seem like a scientist. And he's like, oh, well, I am a doctor. He's like, no, you seem a lot more like a game show host. And as soon as she makes that comparison, I'm like, I feel like that applies to almost every Bill Murray role. There are very few that don't fit that level of charismatic.
Well, to be fair, there's a joke in the second movie where he's literally a TV show host at the start of the movie,
that's true.
Before he's pulled back into the Ghostbusters stuff. So they actually kind of, I guess that was the intention there, is they actually paid that off with where he is at the start of the next one. But yeah, mostly this is the scene where he tries to flirt. He comes on strong, she shoves him out the apartment. I don't have too much to say here.
No, the only thing is that everything that she saw before is not there anymore. So like the eggs are, they were broken, but they're not cooking anymore. They're not exploding. And then inside the fridge is just a fridge. So at that point, he kind of like teases her a little bit, and she takes that poorly. She's just like, no, because now you think I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. Like, that definitely did happen.
Yeah. He mocks her for her junk food in her fridge. Look at your fridge, David. I saw a lot of cans of Coke in there.
Look, man, this isn't about me.
Hey, it's a Sony movie. Sony love to do product placement, so I assume this was very much an intentional thing.
I'm gonna once we hit 2016, I'm gonna start looking up the product placement before it comes out, just so I can have it ready for the thumbnails.
I think you've got like a 7 out of 10 chance that Coca-Cola is going to be in there.
We'll see. I'll check it out. If so, I've already got prepped.
Oh dear. But this actually leads us to the first actual call, and possibly the most famous line in the movie is "We've got one." Like I think I could argue that that's kind of the. I suppose "Who you gonna call?" is actually the most famous line, but that's not in the movie technically. That's in the song.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I feel like there are so many memorable one-liners from this, though, that saying that any one of them is the most famous.
Actually,
like,
hold on.
Yeah.
Who you gonna call? I think is in their TV ad, so technically it is also in the movie. But people don't say it because it was in the TV ad in the movie. They say it because it was in the song. Anyway.
Yeah, but I would argue that obviously we'll get to it in just a minute. But I think I think it was "He Slimed Me" or "I Got Slimed" or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that one is up there in contention. That or the line about the god and towards the end. I don't know. I think all of these are super memorable, even more so than that.
I don't know. It's the moment. Like I remember watching it as a kid because that's the moment you realize, oh, they're Ghostbusters now. Like everything up until now has been like set up.
No, it's definitely a great shift point in the movie because they're literally having Chinese food that they specifically say is the last of their cash. Like they have not had any business. This is it. The business is officially like done, and then that call comes in, and it's such a pivot in where they are as characters because now they're like, we did it, we got one.
And I loved the way Annie Potts plays this scene because she's like, yeah, it's Ghostbusters. What, really? What? You do? Like, she's just so surprised because she's not expecting it. She's probably thinking, oh, I'll have this job for a few weeks until this place shuts down because it's not going to last. But then
I think the second line on the call is even the better one where she's like, yes, this is Ghostbusters. Yeah, we're real. She even has to clarify that point.
Yeah, but then she rings the alarm and just screams, "We got one." Cue. You know, my favorite part of this is that Bill Murray like brings his like box of Chinese food down the pole with him.
Yeah, all three of them have like their own fun way of going down the pole. Ray's like super eager. He slides down it. He's living out his fantasy. Bill Murray's just like, yeah, all right, whatever. And he brings his Chinese down. And then Egon is like super scared of going down the pole. And you can see the fear in his eyes as he slowly descends.
I've never went down a fireman's pole. I imagine I'd probably be a little nervous the first time. But once you've done it a couple times, you'd just be zooming down it.
I mean, I've never spent any time on a pole. So after that, they hop in the Ecto-1. We finally get that.
Yeah, we get the big reveal.
Out.
We get the here's the license plate. It comes darting around the entrance and around down the road. Great. It's got a really distinct sounding alarm, which I think you can hear it as well as see it.
Here's a question for you. Maybe this is a different thing across the pond. If you heard this alarm and you saw the lights blaring, do you think you should move out of the way? Like, it's not an actual emergency vehicle. It's a private entity. Do you think you should be moved out of the way?
What's so funny that you say this is I was thinking about this as the scene was playing out, actually. I was thinking about how, not so much would you move out of the way, because I think vehicles wouldn't necessarily notice what the vehicle is. They'd just see the siren, hear the siren, and move. Yeah. And then by the time it's went past, they'd be like, wait a minute, that wasn't something I'm used to seeing. The question I was thinking in my head was, is this technically illegal to like put your own siren up and pretend you're an emergency vehicle? And part of me thought, if I was writing this movie today, and I'm not saying I could do better, but the one thing that I might put in is when they're with the mayor, it would be like, hey, technically we're breaking the law every time we ride our car. Can you make our like siren official so that people have to actually adhere to it?
I don't know what the laws are. I do know that there's a charge of impersonating an officer. So I think having flashing red and blue lights and a siren might just be enough to cross over of people reasonably assume that you are an officer, and therefore you could get arrested on that.
Oh, I don't know. They've got a distinct color scheme. They've got their own logo.
That's fine, but the red and blue lights specifically, if they change it to like red and green lights, no problem.
What's the red lights? I thought it was like blue lights on top of the Ecto one.
It was red and blue. I'm almost certain there was, but I have no way of checking right now. So
I can't remember any red, but I mean, I'll take your word for it.
That's fine. Tell us in the comments, what were the lights on the Ecto-1? No watching the movie. Just do it by memory.
Yeah, actually, one of the so they arrive at this hotel, which is what they got the call from, and they come out into the foyer, and there's this shot where the three of them are sort of walking in a line in costume for the first time. So you're getting to see all these goods. and all the rest of it. This is actually a scene I remember in the commentary track, and I've not listened to this commentary track again since like the early DVD days. But one of the things that I remember them pointing out in this scene is that back in the day when this was pan and scan for TV before we had just proper widescreen versions at home, is the Egon would always be cut out of this shot because he was at the side. So it's actually a really good movie to show why widescreen and like the original aspect ratio is important. Because there's these shots where 3 or 4 of them are lined up in a row, so you can see them all properly framed in the widescreen, but you cut it to pan and scan, and all of a sudden you've got 2.5 Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I can imagine them walking into the room is fine, but then the hotel clerk comes over on the opposite side of Egon, and all of a sudden the camera just has to yeet right over to that.
Yeah, well, the conversation is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what I love most about this entire hotel section is the fake confidence of, yeah, we've done this a million times before.
Yeah.
There's nothing to worry about. We're professionals here.
And in the moment they get in the elevator and they have some time alone, Ray's like, we've never actually tested out the proton packs. And one of my favorite little dry humor bits is Egon saying, I blame myself, and Venkman saying, yeah, so do I.
Yeah, I love that. I love the body language of Egon turning on Ray's pack and then just backing up into the corner like he's just scared for his life because this thing might be radioactive.
I think they specifically, like before this point, say unlicensed nuclear accelerators on their back.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, no, they're all going to die.
Actually, when they get out of the elevator, and we sort of skipped over the guy who's scared to get into the elevator with them. That's a funny little bit too.
Yeah.
We'll be here all day though if we point out every single little bit. But when they get out of the elevator and they accidentally fire at the maid who's going down the hall with all of her laundry stuff. There's a little gag here that I caught for the first time on this viewing that I really thought was funny, mainly just because I'd never noticed it before. But after they do the whole thing where they fire the proton packs, and we see this throughout the movie that whenever it's hit like a wall or something, there's some fire and stuff. But they turn off the packs, and she's hiding behind her little trolley, and they're like, sorry, and the scene continues, and they talk to each other for a little bit. I never noticed until this viewing that in the background you can see her try to put out one of the little fires with her little bottle of cleaning fluid. She's sort of scooshing the water at it, and I just thought that was really funny in the background.
Yeah, I noticed that too. That was I love when background characters have a little bit of fun, not enough to overpower the scene, but just a little Easter egg of look, they're doing something there.
Oh yeah, I mean it only took 25 viewings to actually notice this, or whatever it has been in my life, but. I really appreciate that. So
at this point they all split up. They start looking for wherever the ghost is, and I think it's Ray who first comes across Slimer eating a dessert tray that's left out in the hall.
Yeah, I really like that when he tries to fire at Slimer, and there's a bit of a pausing and build up before he does it, but Slimer runs away and he goes through the wall, of course, and there's sort of a splat left on the wall where he's went through. But I really like that I don't know if it's this or when he's with Venkman. No, it must be here. The trolley moves with them, and you can see the carpet crinkling as the trolley's moving. I thought that was a fun little detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So then as Slimer goes through the wall, Venkman's we do a little bit with Egon, just poking at a random guy down the hall, and then Venkman comes out to one of the openings and sees Slimer there. He gets on the walkie-talkie with Ray and is like, I've got him, he's here. And Ray tells him, don't move, don't antagonize, he can't hurt you. But then Slimer starts bolting at him, and that's where we get the infamous "he slimed me" line.
Yeah, to which Ray responds, that's great, actual physical contact. And then Egon over the comms is like, save me some. I want some of that slime.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, dear.
So at that point, Slimer's made his way down into the ballroom, and that's where the final standoff's going to be.
That's where most of the property damage is located, because they destroy some chandeliers, several tables, lots of dishes.
I love how it starts out innocently, they don't have full control over the proton pack, so the beam is just kind of going everywhere. This is also, I believe this is the point where Egon points out, don't cross the streams.
Yes.
If that ever happens, everything dies and everything's dead forever. So at that point, it starts out with them not being able to control the proton packs, But then as they come up with more and more plans, it's just willing destruction. Like they're just like, we need a clear space to get down the trap. And they just start shoving tables, flipping them out of the way. And we have Venkman at one point trying to do like the tablecloth trick, and it totally doesn't work, but he still calls it a win.
This is, I feel like this is almost like the idea that firefighters, when they're like going into a building to save people from a fire, obviously they have full carte blanche to just start throwing things around because it's all getting destroyed anyway.
Right.
I feel like this is the same attitude that they've given to the Ghostbusters here, except no, this is still meant to be a functioning ballroom in a hotel after you leave, and you've wrecked half of it.
Yeah. It's like, who was really causing more damage there at that point, Slimer or them?
Yeah. That's a fair point. Yeah, I think part of this is kind of like the recklessness of what this business is. This business to like catch ghosts. Like, it's not like that much thought went into it. They just kind of rushed into it head first because, we can, and it's special because no one's done it before.
Yeah, we are cornering the market. Nobody else knows what we know here.
Yeah, and of course the guy doesn't want to pay the bill, and Venkman's like, we'll just put it back.
Yeah, even before that, though, the whole capturing of Slimer, I could feel the marketing executives being like, we're going to get so many toy sales on proton packs and this trap thing. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I would love to know the sequence of like events there where was it really that thought of early on, or was it more once like the marketing people at Sony saw the movie, saw the rough cut and went, oh, wait a minute, like there's a lot of things in here we can make money out of.
Yeah.
Because I think the cartoon came around this time as Ghostbusters 2. So I want to say that maybe the impact and legacy of Ghostbusters over that 5-year period maybe like made them realize, oh shit, we can make this like a full thing that can appeal to kids and sell a bunch of shit. I bet you Ghostbusters 2 in the cartoon has way more actual like merch and toys than the first movie probably did.
Absolutely. I'm looking up right now Ghostbusters toys, and all I'm finding are the cartoon like variants. I'm not seeing anything that was based off the movie directly. So
that makes some sense to me. Obviously it's the sort of thing where pop culture's changed over the decades to the point now where lots of nerds buy replicas of things, and so there's a market for super realistic looking proton packs and ghost traps and whatever else.
I never actually met them, but my local comic shop, they're host to our local chapter of Ghostbusters, like reenactors or like people who basically have the full proton packs and suits and all that. So I've never actually seen them, but I know they're around.
Yeah, so this kicks us out in the montage though, where they're doing well, like they're getting interviewed on TV. There's news reports about the Ghostbusters, and they're apparently solving ghost problems all over the place.
They actually get like real celebrities to do it. Like you get Larry King and Casey Kasem talking about them.
And some of the magazines and like newspapers we see are real things.
Yep. I'm not sure those would be as hard to like get the licensing to say, hey, can we just make like a fake New York Times headline or something like that? I feel like that'd be easy enough. But the celebrities I was more impressed by. And then this entire time, Dana is like listening to the radio, watching the TV, and seeing their business grow exponentially. Yeah,
she's sort of saying, hey, either they're legit or they're very good at convincing people they're legit. Like one of those two things is happening.
Either way, good for them.
Oh, dear. What does that lead us to right after the montage? I'm trying to remember.
I think after the montage is where Venkman meets back up with Dana outside the concert hall. Yeah,
because she's a violinist, we find out over the course. And the guy she's with, actually, it was bugging me what I know him from, because he is an actor. I'm sure he's played a villain in something else.
I would hope he's an actor, otherwise he's going to be very shocked that he showed up here. That is Timothy Carhart is his name.
Ah, Beverly Hills Cop 3, that's what I know his face from. He's the main villain in Beverly Hills Cop 3.
There you go.
He was also in The Hunt for Red October and Thelma and Louise, so he's done other things, but I think that's what I know his face from mainly, though. But the visual that sticks out to me here is the way the scene ends, where there's like a skater, like a figure skater spinning in the background, and Bill Murray starts spinning as well to kind of like show how happy he is that he's actually got a date with Dana, because he's he's managed to talk to her. He's given her a little bit of info, like, oh yeah, we researched the name of the thing, you know.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, ignoring the earlier Dana scene where she first gets like the vision through her fridge, this is the first scene that actually I feel like is to the end game of the movie, where it's saying, okay, there was Zool, that word you heard before relates to this thing called Gozer, who was a demigod way back in the day. It's something with Sumerians, and that's like all the information he has.
Yeah.
But it's the first sequence that's like towards that end goal.
Well, I mean, I would still say the first one, but Dana is, because it's like the first uttering of the name is kind of the start of the. But
I mean,
the
Dana's whole plot is to the end game of the movie. This is the first time that I feel the Ghostbusters themselves are like they're explaining to the audience, here's what you have to look forward to. Here's how we're setting up this big threat.
Yeah, yeah, and that stuff's good. Like, it's actually the sort of thing where it's been kind of expanded upon, and all you really get in this movie is a few little tidbits that kind of poke at a larger mythology. But it's something that the video game expanded upon, and even Afterlife kind of brought up a little bit. But the idea of the architect of her building is this guy, Ivo Shandar, or whatever his name is.
I think that's right.
Yeah, who's like this, this devil worshipping architect who wanted to bring about Judgment Day and had a cult, and he built the building to be this conduit for like demonic energy leading to parallel dimensions.
But before we get all of that explanation in the movie, there's a shot where they specifically like show the rooftop of the building, and it's these two demonic looking dog creatures, and then what is very clearly like a sacrificial altar on the top of it. And all I literally said at that point was like, yeah, every good apartment building has a sacrificial altar on their roof that nobody's ever questioned.
But to be fair, by the time we get to the scene in the jail cell later when Egon's explaining it, it's like, no, this actually makes sense. The guy built this place to have all this stuff because he was obsessed with it.
I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, because it does. It fully explains it. My question is, why in like the 100 years since it's been built, did nobody ever think to tear down the sacrificial altar? Like, clearly somebody has been up on the roof in that meantime. They could have been like, that's weird. That stands out a bit in the New York skyline.
Because it would, I don't know, cost too much money to remove a big stone altar like that.
I mean, you're probably right. That makes sense.
No one ever comes up here. It's fine. They'll just leave it.
In that case, the only thing that I think is truly missing is some graffiti. There's no way that that's managed to go graffiti-free for that long.
I mean, it is a private apartment building. I guess maybe you could argue there should be some kids or teenagers who live in the building that might come up and do that.
Yeah.
Okay. I could see it. So yeah, date's all set, and I'll just skip to Dana's next scene here, because
that's fine.
We see her come back to her place, and so the party's going on at the neighbors, right, at Lewis's place. And she's like tiptoeing past. So even though he's got music playing and he's got like an apartment full of people talking and socializing, she's tiptoeing outside the door like a cartoon character almost. He still comes out like, Dana!
Oh, hey, Dana, coming over to the party? And she's like, no, I've actually got a date. And he's like, you had a date for the night that I had a party? All right, we'll bring him along too.
I love the pause though, because he's clearly hurt she has a date at all. And then he kind of like, but my party was tonight. You're seeing another man on the night I invited you to my party? What?
But again, I just love his earnestness that he immediately flips it around, being like, all right, yeah, he can come too. Come on. Like, he's like, no, actually, we're not going to go to your party, Lewis. It's
almost a shame that we don't get like a scene of Bill Murray at the party having to interact with them. I know he interacts with them briefly. There's like earlier on when he left her place, because he walks past, like, because Tully's heard her door close and then some footsteps, he comes out and sees Bill Murray and he's like, oh, it's not her, and then tries to go back in and locks himself out again. But they don't really exchange any lines or anything, so you don't really get like Bill Murray having to like sarcastically put up with this accountant character, which would have been fun.
So at that point, Dana makes it back into her apartment, and I think this is about where she gets pulled in for Zool.
It's because we've seen the statues sort of like fall apart and come to life on the roof already, and our mother calls her on the phone. She's like, "I've got a date. It's with a Ghostbuster. I'll let you know." But yeah, then the door opens and it's like this bright white light and the dog demon's there.
And then like hands start bursting out of the chair and start like gripping her down, and then the whole chair just slides into the light.
Yep.
It's a very well done practical effects scene.
Yeah, and then that kind of extends as well, because it's, you know, again, there's a couple of scenes with Ghostbusters or whatever, but because we'll go back and talk about Winston joining the team and all that.
Yeah.
But like the demi-dog, because there's two of them, of course, right? The other one, it turns out, is at the party. It's in the bedroom where all the coats are going, because we get that famous shot of him throwing the coats in the bed, and it just hits the dog in the head. But the dog bursts out at the party. Which apparently Tully was about to hit it off with this blonde, this bimbo character who was going to leave. And he's like, no, what if we dance? Maybe other people will join in. And she's like, okay. And yeah.
Again, it's just something about his earnestness. You know, it's something like he has absolutely no shame and no recognizability of like where he is on the social ladder. And because of that, people are like, I'm all right with this guy. He's pretty cool.
But the dog comes bursting out of the bedroom, like sort of bursts through the wall, effectively, and everyone freaks out. And it specifically targets him, like it starts chasing him. It jumps out into the hall, makes more bashes, and this is where the effects, like it's sort of depending on the shot, they'll either be a practical or they'll be like a stop motion style effect.
Yeah, like a rotoscope / stop motion thing going on, where it's still a New York street and it's still like a live shot, but they have superimposed this clay figure over top of it, and it does date it quite a bit. Like you can tell significantly that it's not there in the shot, but it doesn't look bad. It's just very obviously superimposed.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's got a charm to it, and he runs into Central Park, which I was actually thinking, oh, does she live right across from Central Park? That seems like it must be a nice building then, you know, it's expensive. Admittedly, I don't know if her window looks out that direction. I wonder if the apartments that face the other direction, if they're inherently much, much cheaper because they're not looking at Central Park.
I'm going to say ground floors probably, but as soon as you get up to a certain height and you're able to see the whole New York skyline, it's going to be expensive regardless.
Yeah, I suppose. But they actually mentioned this later when they mentioned that they're building Central Park West. And I'm like, oh yeah, they're actually talking about the fact that it's right next to Central Park. So... yeah, he gets nabbed by the beast when he's like up against this window. There's like a restaurant and he's sort of like banging on the window, begging for help, and no one cares. No one pays attention to him.
It's a wonderful physical comedy because as we're outside with him, there's like this suspenseful music and you hear the roars of the dog or whatever. But every time it's inside the restaurant, it's just peaceful violin music and no one can even hear anything he's saying.
Yeah, it's just a good visual more than anything else. So that sets up that they've both been taken. Just before we go on any further on the main plot, though, we should probably go back because Winston was introduced during this whole...
Winston and Peck, yeah.
So Winston basically just calls up after the montage because he's like ready for a job. And he comes in. As soon as Venkman walks in halfway through the interview, he just sort of says, "You're hired," without even thinking about it.
Well, I love it because it's I'm blanking on her character's name, but Potts.
Janine.
Janine, that's right. Janine is just running down this whole list of like, do you believe in this, that, and the other thing? And like, just gets primarily crazier and crazier, ending up with like the Loch Ness Monster and the theory of Atlantis. And all he has back to say is like, if you're going to pay me, I'll believe whatever you want me to believe. And that's the perfect mood for this character, where he's like, I just need a job and you guys seem to be successful. So where do I sign?
One of my favorite lines, actually, which it's not his line, but he sets the line up. It's when they're down showing him the containment facility, which again is very useful because it's teaching the audience about this, like where they put the ghosts after they've put them in the traps. They've got this thing, they slot the trap in, and they press the buttons, and the ghost is in there. But they're explaining this all to him, and they're explaining that there's a lot of activity in the city, right? And it's like, oh, it's like there's a lot of this ecto activity going on, blah 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 blah. And Egon says, imagine it was this Twinkie. The Twinkie would be this size. And Winston's like, that's a big Twinkie. And then Venkman comes in, and this is right after he's met Peck, so we'll go back and talk about that. But he's like, all this is going on. And Winston says, tell him about the Twinkie. And then Venkman turns and goes, what about the Twinkie? It's just deadpan. It's one of my favourite lines in the whole movie. is
Yeah.
what about the Twinkie?
That's a solid line. I mean, they should have just used that as branding for a while, honestly.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, Peck shows up. He's a member of the
EPA.
EPA. There you go. And he's here to investigate what the Ghostbusters are actually doing and if they're doing anything dangerous with their traps and their containment units and all that. He's very inquisitive about that. I know this is the stuff that gets a little bit of a critique in the sense that, you know, Ivan Reitman was an open Republican when he made this, and this character's kind of meant to represent the idea that, oh, the government safety regulations can come in and like mess with working people and mess with us just like making money.
The Carter era of like when we actually gave a damn about the environment for a brief period there.
So, you know, you can sort of take that at face value, but he's very good at being a prick, and it's enjoyable watching the others kind of fob him off. Obviously, there's not too much to this first scene. He just basically asks. The one thing that I really noticed, though, and really stuck out to me watching it this time, is that the scene pretty much starts with Venkman pointing out that he's a doctor, and then the rest of the scene, Peck keeps saying Mr. Venkman intentionally to show that he clearly does not respect the fact that he's a doctor. And to be fair, we know that he probably shouldn't respect his doctorate because he is kind of just a quack.
Well, yeah, he specifically says, I have a doctorate in psychology and parapsychology. And it's at that point where he's like, oh, parapsychology.
Yeah.
Like psychics. And okay, I get who I'm dealing with here. So, yeah, I think that Peck is fully within his rights to come here and say, hey, you guys, like, you're running a essentially unregulated business right now that may have major impacts to, like, the world at large. We would like to come in and study your equipment. He's totally in his rights to do that. But he does, like you say, come off as such an unlikable prick that it fully justifies everything else that happens later in this movie.
I mean, it's especially when he comes back and he just insists that everything be turned off without any, without even trying to listen to what the consequences for that might be. He just doesn't care. So that's the point where he's just a cartoon character that we can enjoy getting clowned on because he's making such a dumb choice. Even if there was a real regulator coming in here, they'd want to know what the effect was of turning this off before they did it.
Yeah, if I approached some unknown tech and there was a big red switch that said danger on it, which this movie has, I would be hesitant to throw that switch. Regardless of what it should do, I'd still be hesitant.
And it's clear that obviously we had the montage showing that we're being very busy, but even throughout this like next part, like you see like Ray and Winston coming back from like a late night job together, and like there's definitely this implication they've been working kind of pretty non-stop over these last few weeks, tackling various ghost problems. I
think it's right before the Peck scene. It could be wrong, but somewhere in there, Janine basically stops and says like, hey, I haven't had a day off in like 2 months. You said you'd hire on more people. So clearly, I mean, it does a good job of showing time passing, but also showing that they are a lot better at this just over time. I think that when Winston's first hired, Ray's just walking in with like 4 different traps while smoking a cigarette. It just gives this idea of like, this is commonplace now. This is something they have. Yeah, they've gotten through the novice stuff. They are 100% professionals now.
Yeah, and I think that stuff's good. One of the things we've not really talked about, I don't know how much of it's been yet, but there's kind of a running little subplot that Janine clearly has the hots for Egon, and keeps sort of asking him about his hobbies, and he's like, I collect mucus fungus and something else.
Spores.
Yeah. But, you know, this is something that keeps coming up, particularly after, like, Louis Tully, you know, Rick Moranis' character ends up in their care. There's a lot more of that going on there. But yeah, so effectively Peter goes to pick up Dana for the date, right? And when he goes up there, obviously there's all this wreckage from the big demon dog attack that happened with Tully, but he goes up to the door, and when she opens the door, and you know, and the first time you see the movie, you don't know what he's going to find here, because we sort of pulled into this closet of light, but she opens the door and she's wearing this fancy red dress, and her hair's all puffed up, and she's being all seductive, and she's like, "Hey, you're the keymaster." And he's like,
he says no, and she just closes the door.
So he chaps at her again, and when she says, "You're the keymaster," he's like, "Yeah, Yeah. Or at least I know him, but I'm going to meet him here.
Told him I'd swing by, meet up with you first. How's it going?
I think what I like about this scene is that he does kind of catch on fairly quickly that she is just straight up possessed by something, and isn't really entertaining. Oh, he's playing along with her to sort of like keep her in line effectively, but you know, he jokes about being tempted when she's like, "Oh, you know, do me right here, right now," but he never actually really like is tempted to do it. He just kind of jokes around while sort of keeping her at bay. And he's like, look, Dana goes to sleep now. I need to call the others and find out what the hell's going on.
There's that line that you said before of like, oh, get inside me. And he's like, I think there's already 1 or 2 people in there. That's too much for me.
Yeah, and this is the famous line of, you know, can I speak to Dana? And she's like, there is no Dana, only Zool.
Only Zool.
So this is where the main plot's really going, you know, with all this stuff with the dogs and her being possessed by one, Tully being possessed by the other. He's running around the park talking to horses and whatever else.
He's far more of an exposition machine. He's going around and it's like, hey, buddy, who are you? And he's like, oh, I am Vince Clortho, the keymaster. I am looking for the gatekeeper. And he just like explains that to pretty much everyone he meets. Although I do want to say, weirdest possible thing happened to me before I watched this yesterday. So he said his name's Vince Clortho, and I immediately paused because the name Vince Clortho just immediately rang something in my head. Like, I had seen that name within the past 24 hours of watching this movie, and I had no idea how that could have even been possible, because Vince Clortho is not a normal name. Turns out, I had watched an episode of Key and Peele, a comedy show on Comedy Central for anyone who's unaware, and one of their sketches takes place at like a wizard school or something, which is Vince Clortho's Wizarding School. And I just watched that the night before, and I was like, what are the odds that happened?
But
Slim,
it did.
Pete. They're slim.
The slim, yeah, I agree. Very slim.
I think the overlap between Key and Peele watchers and Ghostbusters in the same day is a little bit tiny of a little piece of the chart there.
I don't know. I think Jordan Peele likes movies, so he's probably, you know.
Yeah, he would do it. That's why he named it that. Yeah. I'm sure.
I'm sure he likes Ghostbusters. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's a fan. The police actually take Tully, like they pick him up because he's acting weird, and they take him to Egon at the station, and is like, hey, since this is a weird thing and you guys are into this weird stuff, we thought maybe you'd like to have a look at him.
I like to imagine that they've just been dropping off like schizophrenics for the past 2 months, and this is the first time that it's actually someone who's possessed by a ghost.
I think the probably the most far-fetched part, to an extent anyway, is that they just leave him in Egon's custody. It's not like they just stick around while Egon has a couple of checks with him. They just leave. And maybe you could say, oh, it's realistic because this cop just wants rid of him. He doesn't even care. He's just like,
he doesn't want to do the paperwork.
Yeah, just take him and I'll go. But it is kind of wild that he just leaves him with Egon. But
I mean, in fairness, did he break any laws? Or was he just being weird in public?
Being weird and bothering people, I guess.
Yeah.
They probably picked him up in the same way they pick up someone who's like, oh, I think like whoever your carer is probably looking for you. We should try and keep you in a safe place.
I'd say it'd probably be like a drunk in public sort of charge, if anything.
So they're on the phone to each other. They realize they've got the gatekeeper and the keymaster in different places, and that they should probably not have them be together because that might, cause something to happen.
One thing that Tully says, though, while he's talking to Egon, is specifically about how Gozer, whenever they show up, they take a different form of destruction, and it's just hinting a little bit more of that exposition of what's going to happen at the end.
Mm-hmm. So that morning is when Peck shows up with warrants and police and whatnot, and insists they turn the containment unit off. And Janine tries to keep him out. They try to convince him this is a bad idea. Venkman shows up during this and tries to get it all stopped. But of course he gets this guy, and I love how the little like engineer dude he's brought with them looks at this containment device like, I've never seen anything like this. Maybe we shouldn't go tinkering with it. He's like, I don't care what your opinion is, turn it off.
I also love then Venkman tries to like intervene. He tries to get in the way. The cop holds him back. And then Peck comes in. It's just like, if he does that again, you can shoot him. And the cop 100% is done with Peck. He's like, hey, don't tell me how to do my job.
You work for the EPA. You don't have the authority to tell me to assassinate someone, you little shit.
Exactly. Like, everyone knows that Peck is in the wrong here, but technically he has federal, like, top-down saying that this has to be done, so...
Yeah, and this is the escalation to Act 3. This is, the machine goes off, and all the ghosts start flying through the roof, and there's a bit of a flashing light show. There's, like, smoke and lights coming from the station as they all run out. And, like we see ghosts appearing around the city. There's the famous, like, zombie taxi driver bit and all this, which is, I think that's the one that's the most memorable of all these. But, there's some little bits of chaos throughout.
Yeah, I mean, they show Slimer coming back out in, like, a hot dog cart, but...
Yeah.
For the most part, strangely enough, there's a similar sequence somewhere around Ghostbusters 2, and a bunch of the ones that I remember from Ghostbusters 2, I thought were in this one. So when they didn't happen, I'm like, oh, guess they're going to be in that one.
Yeah, that's why at the moments where people criticize Ghostbusters 2 and say it says it follows the formula of the first one, because they kind of do that same bit around the same part of the movie. I'm curious to see when we watch that again, though, next time, how much I agree with that statement, because I don't remember thinking it was too much of a carbon copy plot-wise, but we'll see. So Ghostbusters get arrested. Peck gets them all arrested. We get the scene that we were kind of talking about earlier, but in the jail cell where they're... And it's kind of a funny scene setting-wise, because you've got the four Ghostbusters looking at these like blueprints and maps and plans of the building, and Egon's explaining all this backstory. And I love how detailed it kind of is for something that is just a throwaway bit of backstory to explain the building. This is exactly the sort of thing that some hack someday is going to make a whole movie about. Like, we're going to do the prequel about Ivo Shandor.
I could fully imagine there being like a season-long arc on the animated show that's just all about the cult that Shandor made.
And I can expect them like that, tapping back into the well of this character just to expand on it a bit. Like, I'm not necessarily against that, but I can see them making a movie about this in the same way that, somehow they got the plans for the Death Star. Wouldn't it be cool if we made a whole movie about that?
It seems that somehow Ivo Shandor has survived.
But the funny part of the scene though is there's just all these random other like people who have been arrested just sort of listening and watching. At one point, Venkman turns to one because, are you getting all this so far? To just this random guy in like a leather jacket.
Yeah, and every time the mood gets like a little bit too serious, like Egon or Ray's like that, like the end of the world, like everything is going to die if this happens, he just kind of lightens the mood. He just turns to everyone else being like, well, so what'd you do last weekend? And
Winston's like, hey, I just started working here. I'm not really like in charge like these three guys are. Yeah. Can I just get out?
he turns to them being like, look, guys, you're my buddies, but like I'm gonna get a different lawyer than you guys because I think that's gonna work better for me.
But what's so good about this though is that the mayor obviously asked to see them, right? Because now obviously the whole city's reporting these weird ghost sightings, and the building next to Central Park starting to have this vortex above it and all the rest of it. And when they get there though, the thing I love about Winston's inclusion is that while he was kind of trying to like disassociate with them before, when all the actual debating starts coming up about this stuff and like, do we really believe all this is going on, Winston's purpose in the movie kind of becomes clear. He is the normal everyday straight man who's able to just confirm that, no, I've been working here for a couple of weeks. This shit's real. And then he's got a really funny line where he's like, I've seen shit that would turn you white, to a white mayor, which is a really funny moment.
There was one tiny little beat I wanted to mention in between.
Sure.
The cop who lets them out to go talk to the mayor is played by Reginald Bell Johnson.
Another Die Hard alum.
Yep,
from the future.
Die Hard, and he's also better known for Carl Winslow on Family Matters. And all I could think is like, wow, this man has never not been a cop. Like,
yeah, Family Matters was not a hit in the UK or on at all.
That's fair.
So
that's fair.
He's the Die Hard cop to me.
That's fair.
I'll probably watch it someday because I like going back and working through old sitcoms that I've not seen. But
I mean, I have watched through it. You can basically skip season 1. Like, you watch it, but don't.
I'm too much of a completionist to... do
Right,
such a
right.
thing.
I'm just saying, if you find that you have other things you need to do, that's okay. You can just let it go.
Okay. Yeah, I honestly, this scene with the mayor is so good. For multiple reasons. You've got the debating with Peck, and like, you know, one of the I think it's Ray that says this man has no penis.
No, he says like, oh, everything was going fine until Dickless over here turned off the containment grid, and the mayor's like, is that true? And Venkman's like, that's true. This man has no dick.
But then there's a follow up to it where he refers to him as Pecker, and he's like, my name's Peck. But so that gets rid of him, right? But my favorite part, or well, not quite yet, but my favorite part of all this is the way that Venkman appeals to the mayor, and this goes back into him being his like Saul Goodman like side of things, but it ties into what his attitude's been the whole movie, because his attitude at the start of the movie is that I want to do this to make money. He's not really taking it seriously. It's all just to make money, maybe meet some women. Like that's all he's been doing the whole time. He appeals to the mayor by saying, look, if none of this is true, then we all just go to jail, no harm, no foul. But if it is true and we can stop this, then you're the mayor who saved, you know, X number of million
44 million registered voters. He pitches it to him like a business opportunity. It's almost as if he was pitching it to himself, right? As if he was pitching to himself the Ghostbusters scheme from the start and saying, hey, you could be a hero and make money by providing this service. This is enterprise. Yeah. He's basically appealing to that side of the mayor, and that's what convinces him he should do it. It's not this like, oh, you could be a hero and do something good for the sake of doing the right thing. You could be a hero, and that'll get you reelected. Yeah,
that's how he appeals to him, and that's what's so good about this. Apart, you know, aside from the the dickless joke and the other things, and
there's the whole sequence where they're trying to say like, okay, how bad is it really? And they just start listing off all these apocalyptic things of just like rivers of fire, volcanoes, darkness blotting out the sky. I just really like that whole bit because it's just more and more escalation until finally it hits Venkman, who's like, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Yeah, there's also in the middle of the scene like a bishop or something comes into the room, and like the mayor's like kissing his hand and so, you know, thank you, Father, blah blah blah, and he's like, officially I can't say what the church's stance is in all this phenomena, but personally I think it's a message from God. And I think the payoff to this is that when Venkman makes his pitch about, hey, you could save 44 million registered voters, it cuts to the priest and he just sort of like nods like, yes, he's right.
That's true.
Right? I love that this cynical idea that even the spiritual man is like, he's right, this could lead to great success for you, my friend.
Look, God helps those who helps themselves, wink wink.
Oh dear. So yeah, it's like, okay, the mayor's given them carte blanche to go save the city, so they get a police escort. We get the Alessi song playing as they drive to the building to try and save the day. And you know, and I love that Venkman's like eating it up, and he's like saying hello to the crowd, and you know, just doing some like hyping as he's doing it. He's always the showman.
Yeah.
Even to the point where when the ground starts to crack open and it looks like they might have died. I mean, obviously, you know, they didn't, but it's like, oh, they might have been swallowed by the earth. They climb back out, the crowd starts cheering, and Venkman starts like, what? They want to play rough? We can play rough. Like, we can do this.
I would kill to see an alternate cut of this movie where they did die in that moment. And then, like, we just see the whole Gozer thing continue on. Like, that would be an amazing ending to this movie.
Yeah, again, it's still a comedy, so you know they play this for a laugh, but it does a harsh cut from this like heroic, we're going to go save the day, to them climbing the stairs and just being like out of breath and miserable and struggling to get up there.
Yeah, the line's like, oh, what floor are we on? And he's like, I don't know, somewhere in the teens. He's like, cool. When we get to 20, let me know. I'm going to throw up.
Yeah, I think Dana's floor is 22 because her door number was like 2206. But you know.
I mean, I didn't check it that much, so I'll take your word for it.
I just happened to notice the number on her door at one point. So
I wonder if I checked like Ghostbusters Day, like there is Alien Day. I wonder if like June 22nd would be it because that's Dana's door number.
That one's a bit of a stretch.
That's the stretch, not the planet number from the first one that was only mentioned like twice.
First of all, it's the planet that the entire second movie's set on as well.
That's true.
and it's mentioned a bunch in that one as well. So
I forgot that they came back to the same planet in the second one because it was such a long time span between the two.
Plus, the planet where the beacon that has the alien ship on it is a bit more prominent than just the random number that happens to be on Dana's door.
Everyone, I'm really sorry that I activated Pete's alien defense here. That's my fault. I'm sorry.
Ask stupid questions, get stupid answers. I mean,
they are stupid answers. So, so yeah, they climb up to the top. They get into Dana's room, which is just completely blasted to shreds because somewhere in all this, we've got to mention.
It was when the ghosts were flying around and doing stuff.
Yeah, they were flying around. At the Dana's room literally just explodes because she wakes up from her nap, and then Lewis meets up with Dana. They say, "I'm the keymaster. I'm the gatekeeper," and they head up this stairwell to go up to the roof. They
kiss first, and I love the detail here that she holds him like he's the woman, like she sort of has him cradled in her arms, and I love that detail.
She dips him, and then they walk up hand in hand up the stairs to this sacrificial altar / doorway to another dimension.
Where it's subtly implied that they had sex. I say subtly because this is something that Afterlife doesn't do subtly, where they just have to have the characters like, did we? Yeah, I think we did. Oh, that's a bit risky, isn't it? And I love the idea that the conversation later on, after the credits have rolled, where Dana turns to Venkman and goes, I think I might have had sex with that little man last night.
I mean, to be fair, it seems like they don't remember anything at all once they get possessed. So they would have no idea.
That's true. So, yeah, there's this magical staircase leading to the roof with the altar and all that shit. The Ghostbusters get up there, and even this isn't without its share of jokes, even though we're in the big climax and we're doing the big face-off. Like, they do the big shots. They've got this fantastical set, lots of dry ice.
Oh, yeah.
Gozar comes out, and it's this kind of like woman in like a skin tight
it's
leotard.
Like an androgynous looking woman, like David Bowie style. With very red eyes.
Yeah, at one point one of them yells, "Aim for the flat top," because of her haircut.
Yeah. Also at this point, Dana and Lewis have transformed back into their dog forms, and so they're just like the pets of Gozer at this point.
Yeah, and it plays out. They try and like Venkman sends Ray up to talk to her first, and she's like, "Are you a god?" And he's like, "No."
Well, first is the payoff to the library scene.
Oh yeah,
you were wanting, where it's like, all right, well, someone's gonna have to go deal with her. And Venkman turns to Ray, "Go get her, Ray."
Actually, I think I was even more confident in that. I was like, "Nah, like we'll deal with this. We've got this covered. Go talk to her, Ray."
Yeah.
So they all get zapped back and all the rest of it, and then they pull out their proton packs. Okay, and then there's that the other the line that everyone always remembers from this part, which is, "Let's show this bitch how it's done downtown."
Yeah.
Or how we do things downtown. And they try and zap her. Doesn't go a whole well. She does a whole big jump and all the rest of it. And she goes all like ethereal and turns into just a voice. And they're all kind of freaking out. And she says, like, one of you need to pick what your...
Yeah, choose the form of the destroyer.
Form of the destroyer, yeah. And they're all like, no, don't think of anything. Don't think of anything. She wants us to pick. And immediately after Reitman tells that to the other three, their choice has been made. Yeah. He's like, "Wait, I didn't pick anything. Egon, did you pick something? Winston, did you pick something?" And then I love that he doesn't ask Ray. They all just turn and look at him. So again, it's just a visual comedy beat. It's what makes it so funny.
And then just in such a quiet little voice, Ray's like, "It just popped in there. I don't know how. I was just thinking," and then immediately Egon sees something down the street. He's like, "Look," and Ray is just like baffling. He's like, "No, it couldn't be. There's no way." And as we finally, it steps into frame, he's like, "It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man." And that is the moment. That exact moment is where I would have killed to be in the original theater during that moment. Because that is the most just deadbeat, like no one could have possibly have seen that coming level of comedy. It is almost absurdist humor in that way, but it's just so well paced, so well done. I love that comedic beat.
It's such an escalation from the opening like half hour of the movie. Like I don't think when you first saw this movie in the 80s, you could have imagined that the ending was going to have a 100-foot tall Marshmallow Man walking around like a kaiju. It's just such an absurd ending to this thing that started off with these guys starting a business. That's what the movie was. It was three guys starting a business and trying to make money, and it's kind of cynical, and you know, yeah. So obviously the whole thing here is, let's just cross the streams. That might work. I do love though, before they try that, when they just try blasting it, you get a great wide shot of like the proton beams like hitting it from like a really wide angle, and it's just really cool to see, because everything else is just mostly close up, so you don't really see the beams from that distance, and it just looked quite cool, the effect. And there's a lot of cool map paintings here of the city and things like that to create, complete the effect shots and all the rest of it.
Definitely feels like they set up probably like a decent sized miniature set just to be able to have the Stay Puft Man be able to march down the streets like this.
Yeah, for sure. I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier, where the map paintings obviously don't look real. You can tell they're map paintings, but they look good. This is the difference between like bad CG and like a map painting, which is obviously a map painting, but it's still like really good artwork. Like someone's put the effort in and made this gorgeous looking painting to represent the rest of the city. So it's like what those posts. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the artist, but those posters for like Indiana Jones that had like the real painterly style to them. Streisand, I want to say.
Streisand, okay. It's that sort of thing where people have imitated his style, but nobody has quite hit that little extra like mark to it. No one ever quite hit it just as well as he did. It's the same sort of thing. These map paintings are solid. They are very, very good map paintings. But like when you see a bad map painting, you know it. Yeah,
for sure. Whereas this is still very visually pleasing to the eye. So yeah, they cross the streams, and thus plays out, the ending, which, there's some chaos. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man explodes.
They're also fully expecting and kind of willing to die at this point. Like, they're like, all right, well, that's what's going to take to save New York. We cross the streams and we see you on the other side.
Yeah, they get really cocky before the voice starts talking to them, actually, where they think they've won. This is the part of the movie that, as a kid, made me want to go swimming in shaving foam, because that's what this is. Like, it's just shaving foam landing on people in the street. And it made me, like, because all the Ghostbusters get covered in it, except, funnily enough, Venkman, who must have just been hiding in the right place, where he's just got like a little bit in his shoulder. And I think this is just a visual gag, the idea that the sleazy one got away with not being covered in the marshmallow, but the other three are all just covered in like chunks of shaving foam. I think it's a good visual joke.
It feels like he was hiding behind Ray, probably. Because Ray got drenched. He was covered in it.
Oh dear. So yeah, it turns out Dana and Lewis are fine, but they're inside like the sort of the now statues of the dogs. So they break them out, and that's kind of where things wrap up. And immediately Lewis is like, "Hey, who does your taxis, Ghostbusters? I could help with that."
Yeah, and then as they're leading him away, it's just like, "Well, you've been part of a very supernatural event. We'd like to take a part of your brain, if that's okay." And he's like, "Yeah, that's fine."
And the final line of the movie is Winston yelling, "I love this town."
Yep. And then there's actually like an epilogue, I guess you could call it that, but it is literally the credits have already started playing, so it's kind of just a credit scene as well.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't say it was the final scene. I just said it was the final line.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I don't see many movies that have done this where the story continues like as the credits are rolling over top.
I mean, it's just the theme song plays as they're going out into it's the morning now in the street, and they're going into the car. Time must have passed a little bit here. Because it was only just getting dark when they went into the building, and it's not been that long. But it does kind of make sense that they went back to Dana's place and she got like her bathrobe or something and like get changed out of the dress, because she's wearing like some different stuff.
I mean, it would have had to literally pass through her apartment on the way down, so
makes sense. I suspect they maybe sat around for a little bit and get their energy back before the trip back down. Yeah,
they cleared themselves of foam. They had to take a shower.
Yes.
I do like, that is very clearly a just kind of like a continuity thing that probably it shouldn't have been the next morning by the time they came down. But I almost was willing to completely forgive it, because if you notice, it's light, still like almost nighttime, but it's light when they go into the building. But then if you remember, the portal thing over top causes darkness. Like it was just completely blotting out the sun. So I thought that it was only dark because of the portal. And once they cleared it off, then it's, back to daytime. However, once they clear off the portal, they make it very clear that, like, no, it's a starry night and the sun has set. So
Yeah.
almost had it, and then just one shot kind of ruined that theory.
It's not a big deal. It's about as much as you get. It's basically just everyone waving. Venkman kisses Dana. They're kind of waving to the crowd. They get in the car and they leave. It's just a nice little farewell.
Except for Lewis, who's like, hey, I was also up there. Anybody want to interview me? And instead of getting in the car with everyone else, he's led aside by medical professionals.
He could probably use a trip to the hospital, to be fair.
Yes, but if that's the case, Dana should too. There's no reason he should have been separated from the group.
I love the idea that Dana's going with the Ghostbusters and they're all just going to go and get a big lunch or something just to, like, unwind after a hectic night of whatever that was.
I fully expect them going back to the mayor and probably finding Peck as well and just being like, so let's talk about how you're going to refund us here for some of our pain and suffering.
Well, I have to imagine there was enough witnesses of the 100-foot tall Marshmallow Man to just give them some credibility.
I want to see 2 extra scenes. The first one is them talking to the mayor, and the mayor's like, "Why did the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man? That came out of nowhere." And Ray just shies, is like, "I don't know. That was weird. Why would that have happened?"
Yeah.
And then the second one is somewhere on, like, Wall Street or something. There's an executive of the Stay Puft company who sees that walking down the street, and he's like, "Oh, God damn it."
Yeah. Oh, we should mention Peck just showed up so he could get covered in shaving foam in the final, which makes sense. The asshole of the movie has to get his little comeuppance at the end. It's just 101. I think what's so good about Ghostbusters is that it's the perfect marriage between the comedy and actually escalating to a fun and good plot for the third act, which I find that, like I said earlier, most comedies tend to struggle with. Is when they try and get more serious in the third act or try to actually have something that feels like a payoff. And then there's some comedies where they won't even bother really trying. They'll just kind of they'll do like a little thing to make it feel like it's the end of a story. But for the most part, you were just there for the jokes anyway. This actually feels like it builds to a conclusion. There's stakes, but it's funny the whole way through. It's very impressively balanced and well paced.
Yeah, I think it's because the stakes are so cartoonishly large. Like, it literally is the fate of humanity as a whole. And these 4 schmucks from New York are the only ones who can save the day. Like, it's an inherently funny concept if you look at it from that perspective. Obviously, they play it somewhat straight in that, this is an end of the world scenario. They aren't, like, saying that that's a stupid thing to begin with. But like you said, the characters just manage to keep the zingers coming. They manage to keep a lighthearted tone throughout. Even when they are literally accepting their death, we have a beat just to register the somberness of that. And then Venkman jumps up with, like, "I love this plan. It's a good plan. I'm happy to be a part of it." And then just runs into the fray. Like, everyone still has fun the whole way through.
In a weird way, that, like, I think Venkman doing that and saying, "Hey, let's be positive about this, right? Because we're going to save the world." It's almost like a nice little, like, final note to his character, because the whole movie he's been this cynical guy who's just been doing it for the money, and he's been very entertaining. It's never really been a problem where you feel like he needs a big character arc or redemptive moment or anything like that. But this idea that he's got that attitude about sacrificing themselves to save the world, it's like, he is good at heart. Like, ultimately, he's still a good guy underneath. Like,
oh yeah,
it's not a big thing, but it's kind of there because he's the one with that attitude. He's there to inspire the rest, and if he is the guy who's able to talk things up and, like, sort of pep them all, it feels like he's even doing that here. He's giving them all the sort of the boost of confidence to be like, yeah, we should do this. Let's try and save the world. So
yeah,
there's a little thing there. I think it's just sometimes you just strike lightning with a concept, and I think the idea of an emergency service thing that's for ghosts, and they have a car, you can ring them like an emergency service. Maybe once now that they've done this, maybe they'll be added to 911 where you just phone 911 and it'll reroute you through if you're going to them.
What's your emergency? My dad died 10 years ago.
And, like, that's just such a cool concept because it's inherently funny, and there's so many ways you can see it going wrong. But when you have this cast who are all very funny, right? Obviously, Murray's at the head of that, but we've praised Moranis. Sigourney Weaver plays the great straight woman, kind of in the middle of all this, who's kind of endeared to the goofball that is Bill Murray's character.
She plays a great straight woman, but then the moment she becomes Zool, she immediately like changes characters entirely, and she's still just as engaging.
I have to imagine like the appeal of this character for her, because like up until this point, the idea that spooky things are happening, she's scared. Not that it's exactly like Alien by any means, but she's already like got a character where she's like dealing with scary things in a very serious way. I have to imagine part of the appeal of this was that, oh, in the third act, I get to be like the evil one. I get to be possessed, and I get to
be over the top. Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's an appeal there probably for her.
Absolutely. As someone who has done like smaller acting roles and stuff like that, not in any actual productions, but like any time that there is permission to ham it up, those are always the best ones because you get to just have fun with it. Yeah.
It's full of memorable characters. Even Winston, who like comes in halfway through the movie, like never when I think of the Ghostbusters do I think of it being anything other than four of them. Even though like it starts off with just the three, and like they're the ones who set up all the plot. But I still think of it as four, even from this first movie, because by the time you get to that final big, third act, he feels just as important to the team as any of the others do, except maybe like Venkman, like I say, feels kind of like the main one, but as far as Ray and Egon go, he feels just as equal to them as far as like what he brings to the table.
So yeah, no, absolutely. I think that this is a great movie if you need to like kind of break down a group dynamic and see how different people can fill different roles. This is a great movie to show how, despite the fact that everyone is so different in personality, they all come together as a cohesive whole of you feel like this is a team working together as the Ghostbusters.
Yeah, and they all mostly serve different purposes to represent the audience in different ways. Venkman is like cynical and skeptical, and that kind of like sinks into the idea that we're going to be like, well, we don't really believe in ghosts, so there should be a character who kind of fulfills that kind of feeling. Ray is the more earnest, genuine, like wonderment, like you said. He wants to believe in this stuff, and he's like impressed by it and is fascinated by it. Egon is kind of like the functional one to explain the exposition and make it all work together.
He's the one that changes it from fantasy to science fiction, pretty much.
And then, like we said, Winston's the everyman who comes in and is able to react to things and give us that perspective. They all kind of fulfill different elements of what the audience might be reacting to the movie with. And I think that's also another little genius thing that the movie's done. And
I think in terms of comedy, each of them also has like their own distinct style as well.
Yes.
It's even just delivery. Like you don't get sick of the way the jokes are told because they each tell them in a very different way.
And the thing I want to emphasize the most, I think, after this viewing is just how well paced it is. Like I said that earlier, but it is so well paced. It's a tight 105-minute movie. It's every scene setting something up. It's it's either setting something up or it's paying off something and making you laugh, and it's doing that the whole time. And the fact that it can do that and actually give you this fully fleshed out concept that does have all these things that you love to talk about, like the car, the proton packs, like all the other things that make up what the Ghostbusters are. They're not the important things, but they're definitely ingredients in the pie. It's a full thing, and it really is lightning in a bottle. And why any attempts to kind of copy this and mimic it with other concepts. I'm not talking about the sequel or even like things that have tried to continue Ghostbusters. I'm talking about just anything that tried to be the next Ghostbusters, including something like Evolution or anything like that. It's so difficult, like to put the things together the way this movie has, and it's what makes it so special. And I think most of us growing up watching it, it's really easy to like not realize how special that is. But until you've spent years looking for things that are as good as it in the same vein and just never been able to find them because they just don't really exist. So it's what makes it truly special and like a one-of-a-kind concept that just works on its own. So
yeah, no, I mean, just wholesale agree with everything you said there. It's lightning in a bottle, and I think that is as we get to it next week, that is the sort of thing that, how do you make a Ghostbusters 2 then? how do you capture lightning in a bottle? You get the exact same cast back, you get everybody returning. How can you continue that lightning in a bottle again?
And for the record, going into it, we'll see exactly what my opinion is next episode, but I like Ghostbusters 2. I'm not one of these people who thinks it's just a crappy sequel, which I know a lot of people who were around. I mean, I was alive at the time, but I was like, it was the year I was born it came out, so.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I remember Ghostbusters 2 as good, but I definitely remember it having some level of pacing issues.
Sure.
Even back then, so.
But I remember arguably liking the villain more than the first one. So.
I mean, if you told me picture the villain from Ghostbusters, I immediately go to the Ghostbusters 2 villain. I don't even picture Gozer.
Yep, that's fair. So we'll see how our feelings of that hold up. I think what's funny about 2 is that Dana's got a baby in 2. And I love to make the joke that I relate to the baby because it's the year I was born, so I'm literally the baby's age.
Oh yeah,
when the movie came out.
I'll watch the cast and see who played the baby. We'll see what he's up to.
Oh dear. All right, I think we're ready to rate Ghostbusters. David, what are you giving it?
I'm going the 10.
Oh, okay.
And to be fair, that is actually the first 10 I've ever given on Collector's Cut. I've given 9s before, but like this, the thing that I said, and the reason I always held back from 10s is because it needs to be that little bit of extra special something to me personally. It needs to be something that I have a deeper attachment to than just the quality of the film is fantastic. But I think the quality of the film is fantastic, and I have the attachment to this. It's something that I can go back to over and over again. I got genuine laughs out of it. It's just like you said, lightning in a bottle. It's such a well-made movie that it's amazing that it hasn't been more driven into the ground, It's amazing that this isn't something that had sequel after sequel throughout the entirety of the 90s. So, yeah, no, I'm just going to go flat 10, and I'm not looking back.
All right. I just double-checked because I was curious. I've never given a 10 in Collector's Cut either.
Okay. Is this going to be the first time?
Yeah. Criterion Cut, I have given a 10.
Oh, yes, same, yeah.
Of course. On the Atomic Cinema Experiment, or sci-fi movie podcast, I have given a couple 10s, but not on this show yet. No, I'm not going to 10. I don't. Okay. I can't give it the perfect score. For me, this has just kind of always been a 9 out of 10, and that's what I'm going to give it today. It's a fantastic movie. It's lightning in a bottle. I don't know what would make it go up to a 10. I think on some level, I don't think I've ever given a comedy a 10. And I think
that's fair.
Part of me thinks I just never will. And I think there's a certain element of just not being emotionally as seriously invested in what's happening. This is definitely as best as it can be in a pure comedy as to how much I care about the plot. But there's definitely a ceiling there, and I think Ghostbusters is the absolute height of that ceiling. But I don't think I've ever given a 10 to a pure comedy.
That's fair.
Something that has comedy in it, sure, but this is a comedy first, and I think it's as far as something that is a first and foremost a comedy. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's definitely in that sort of top 5 range.
Okay. Yeah, so. I mean, I get what you're saying there. I can see the comedies, there is that little bit of an emotional barrier between you and the movie when it is a comedy, but for me, maybe it's just the nostalgia talking, maybe it is the sort of thing. By the way, I have never seen Afterlife, so once we hit those nostalgia scenes, I'm fully expecting to be like, stop pandering to me, you bastards. But yeah, no, maybe it's just nostalgia talking, but like, it is something that it's almost a level of like comfort food, but at the same time, it's incredibly well done comfort food. Either way, it's like it's like as if my comfort food were filet mignon. Like, great, awesome, and I'm glad I have it. So, yeah. Beyond that, does it make the cut, Pete?
I mean, it's a cut above. Let's not dance around it.
It's so nice to have a cut above. We've had so many seasons lately where it's just like not been there.
We've not had one since Nolan's season.
Yep. I'm glad we have it.
Yeah. It's a special movie. It's a big thing in pop culture, and all the other things we've already said. And we broke 2 hours on this episode, so
Woo!
that's fun.
It's a good thing that we don't stop at the length of the movie itself, because then YouTube thinks we're just posting the movie and they get really angry at us.
No, we exceeded it this time.
Perfect.
It's funny though, because we were going through the movie and I'm like, oh god, we're actually quite a bit into this review and we're only at this part of the movie, and we kind of sped up a little bit towards the end. The one that I'm worried about when we do it on the Ace is Back to the Future, because
Oh god, yeah.
because me and Tara actually tried to do a Back to the, and I think it was a technical fault like halfway through that stopped the recording, but I think we were almost at 2 hours and I swear we were only halfway through the plot.
That's fine.
Because I had so much to say on every scene in that movie.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything too much, but if I have if there's a secondary comfort food, it's Back to the Future. Hands down. I love that trilogy. So prepare for the epic 9-hour trilogy review.
Oh yeah. So yeah, if you want to hear me and David talk about sci-fi movies, he is now the regular co-host on the Atomic Cinema Experiment. He has been for a couple of months now. Go check out that on the same channel on YouTube or as its own podcast feed, the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Anyway, speaking of promoting things, if you want to support us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, you can do that and get some bonus shows. Every patron gets access to the Criterion Cut, which is our monthly show where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. Those tend to be very highly rated because they're some of the best movies ever made.
Yep.
So check out that. $5 and up patrons get access to Extra Reels, which is the opposite of that. It's some of the worst movies ever made. And I saw something this past couple of days, David, that in theory should be an Extra Reels episode someday, although I'm not convinced we'd actually be able to fill a whole episode talking about it, because it's that much of a non-movie that I don't think we could actually talk about it for like an hour or so. I just don't think we could.
Was this a stream movie?
It was a stream movie.
I think I know the one you're talking about, and I've already seen that, so I'm going to just say no. I don't want to do it again. I don't want to be there.
Yeah, I don't want to watch it again either. I think we could just leave it.
Yeah, all right. I'm good with that.
Okay. One day I'm going to, they're going to make me do a goal where it becomes an Extra Reels episode.
As long as you set up a competing goal to not do it, and I will donate as much as I have to.
Sounds like I can profit very well from that. Thank you very much.
I don't care if it's insider trading. I'm doing it.
Anyway, that has been our thoughts on Ghostbusters. Big classic. Hopefully you've enjoyed us reminiscing, talking about various scenes. And we'll see you next week for, obviously, Ghostbusters 2. So, thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have a diplomatic immunity.